Duncan, I think over the course of all these episodes, you have been very mean to me. And I think you should apologize for being mean to me always and treat me
Right,
better.
so nothing's changed since the last time, okay.
I know, exactly. What was all that about? That's just because that's on stream, innit? Like he's trying to be a fucking big boy now. Now he thinks people can secretly hear him, what he's pretending is off camera. It's like, may as well stand up for myself one time, guys. Hey, bully, I'm not going to let you do that anymore. Like every fucking American TV show about college teaches you we're supposed to do that apparently in high school. Even though anyone who's ever seen any real life scenario knows if the little kid getting bullied says that to the big guy, he still gets dumped in a fucking locker, probably just 10 times worse. Like the idea that that ever worked was just nonsense. But we'll put aside your ridiculous culture that you've attempted to fucking appropriate Loco, pretending like you're American at the same time as come from Korea, while also failing all the Korean expectations around your life. And we'll start the episode. This is episode 72 of Listen Loco. Listen, normally I roast Loco for the guests, so I'll roast myself this time, which is
nice.
Because Loco has actually finally himself learned how difficult it is to book guests, to get people, etc. He basically gave up the fucking ghost, didn't he? Because what you've seen his life, his career. He gives something a go once, doesn't work out, he just quits. He goes, licks his wounds for a while, waits for some friend of his to just nepotistically pull him out of the fucking grave, and then comes back and gives it another go. So, you know what, maybe one day he'll try again booking the guests. Sadly, yours truly has to take over and start running the fucking show again, getting those big marquee names. And as Loco has had to learn, one of the reasons why it's really hard to book guests for shows is if you go for the biggest name player every time, you probably waste 3 days not getting that guy to come on the show when he eventually says, I can't do it anywhere else. So it's so hard to... So what I did, just to set the stage here, is I just did the classic move immediately. When you get tasked with something like that, you go straight to the old Rolodex. You go to the very safe part of the Rolodex and you go, right, who's going to say yes on the first go? There we go. So what I've done is I've resurrected one of the old talk show duos, me and Kelsey Moser, K-Moz, except we're bringing her back not to talk about what everyone probably assumes, which everyone would assume must be LCS because she works in NA now. But no, Kelsey has followed Europe for many, many years. She still watches it to this day. Obviously, we can even start there. So, Kelsey, why do you watch LEC? If you work in Academy of NA and, in the past, Europe wasn't considered the best region, do you just watch it due to your ongoing interest in the region? Does the fact that it now produced potentially the best team in the world have something to do with why you watch the region? Why stay up to date on Europe?
I guess for me, I made a point of, for the past few years, watching all 4 major regions. I mean, we can count LMS, but basically I'd watch 4 major regions in Flash Wolves, and now I don't even bother with that. But when I come to Academy, right, I have to watch NA Academy. So it's like, what can I replace with NA Academy? Obviously, it would be nice if I kept up with LCS, if I had something to do with the LCS team, or if we were competing against LCS teams. But if I'm looking at LCK, LPO, LEC, and LCS, what can I learn the least from? I know. Okay, we're going to replace LCS with NA Academy.
Wow.
Okay, this is what we're doing.
I see how it is.
Okay, it happened. That was done.
Yeah. There we go.
So, okay, by the way, just on that point you just touched on there, when you said that you actually did used to literally watch all 4 major regions and then Flash Wolves, presumably because you're implying LMS wasn't one of the 4 that you're watching, then you still used to watch Flash Wolves anyway, because obviously they would be the team representing that region, LMS, at MSI or Worlds, etc. Right? As someone who did this, can you indeed confirm what I've tried to tell people many, many times, which is nobody actually watches all 4 regions? Like, to do that just logistically, it must be mind-blowing, right?
I mean, it's weird because I try to engage people who claim to watch all 4 in more detailed conversations about comparison, and pretty much everyone just kind of like waffles as, well, they play around mid lane. It's like, okay, how do they do that? What do they do with this champion pick? And it's just like, okay, well, this is a very fruitful comparative topic, comparative discussion. So most people who claim that they watch all major regions don't actually, but it's when you actually dedicate the time to do it, it's really hard on your sleep schedule. So you have to be willing to give up a lot of time to do it, especially if you also have scrims on top of that, which I do. So
I just
I'll
watched.
also even throw in as well, by the way, like there's a difference between watching a game. I think there should be a different term. Like in my opinion, the term should be like studying, analyzing, because there's another problem, right? So every fan's going to say, well, I watched LCS last week. It's like, yeah, you watched it. Like if I watch a game now and I'm not doing it for a specific show, I'm going to watch it like a pleb, aren't I? Like, oh, look at, the Lee Sin kick. Oh, and he almost got him. Oh, so close. Like that's how a fucking pleb watches it. Like, if you actually are trying to watch it to learn as well, that's also another level of focus, breaking down the game, etc. Like, I feel like people mad underrate how much, just to do the basic VOD reviews, how much time this shit takes, how much effort. It's a lot.
I just watched
Look at Loco.
Yeah.
Emails him in all the fucking time.
What? Fuck
like,
you.
I technically watched LCS yesterday. I had it running in the background where scrims were on. So there you go.
Exactly.
I technically
Yeah.
watch LCS.
I mean, watching 4 regions is crazy. I just watched the best 2. LCS and EU, baby.
Obviously. Okay.
Here's the thing: we've again, this is something that never been overtly said, but I've sort of come to the agreement with myself now to just let him get the odd shit joke like that in, and then what I do is I don't outright like roast it every time. Sometimes I just don't laugh and then wait a second and then move on anyway. So I'm still a cunt. Don't worry about that. Right. So anyway, moving on. Another factor as well, though, to be fair, in that sense, is like that's how I actually learned not to take people's opinions too seriously on games that they say they've just watched in that sense. Because another factor as well, I have to say, is I know for a fact I was there. I've seen so many pro players in Europe, for example, when I used to go to LCS when it was back on them, who would say to me, oh, I watch all of LCK. And I've seen how they do it. They're playing a fucking scrim while it's on the other monitor. So what's happening is they're just hearing the cast. Ooh, oh my God. And they turn the team fight 3v4. Because he's playing a game as he's doing it. It's like, basically, here's a quick side point. I've learned, and I'm going to tell you all the secret right now, to make you all be able to, in your regular life, seem like you can almost put up the fake simulacrum of being a human being. Are you ready? All you nerds out there, I'm going to let you feel like you're real people. The mistake you're making is you're recommending anime to your friends and family, people who you respect and hopefully want to respect you and consider you a serious human being. And what you're not telling them all is that that's how you watch anime. You watch anime on a second monitor while playing a game on the other monitor. If you tell them that, it's fine. Because I have to say, I had mad low respect for people in esports who said they watched anime. Because I used to just say to them, all right, go on then, give me like the top 3 and what's the best 3. And they would link me right to, first of all, half of them were plebs, and it was like One Piece or some like super generic one. And I would think, you know what? Don't judge them. Give it a fair try. And the way I watch things, because I'm like a cinephile, I like to watch movies and really absorb them. I was watching it like that. I would sit there. I was sat down in my chair. I had the whole monitor set up in front of me. No distractions. Phone off the hook. I'm watching, and I'm going, this can't really be it. Like, what? There's no depth to this. There's nothing. What is this? Like, the fuck is that? Well, people are raving about this shit. People are making their whole identities about these shows and characters. And what I learned was, I'm watching it the wrong way. If you just chuck it on a side monitor and you're doing something else, and every now and then you glance at it and you see half the, whatever, then it can actually seem half decent, because it's basically entertainment. It's not supposed to be focused upon. But that's a long side route to just say, you're all fake. None of you watch all 4 regions. Even when you do, you watch it like plebs. You're just like a cretin. You're like a guy who basically hasn't developed mentally watching fireworks. You're like, oh my God, oh yeah. And it's at the end, you wouldn't be able to explain what a firework is, how a firework's constructed, what the physics are behind the trajectory of a firework. You wouldn't know any of that shit. So anyway, the point is, now we've established it all. Kelsey's watched everything. You've all watched nothing. Let's start the LEC episode.
Wait. I want to ask Kelsey about something. Kelsey, do you watch anime?
I watch in off season. Sometimes I'll watch something if it's supposed to be pretty good. Like I tend to not really like. I haven't seen stuff like Naruto, One Piece that he mentioned,
my God.
and stuff like this. But
Don't bother, they're all shit trash.
Naruto's great.
The amount of fillers is garbage, it isn't. Here's the thing, Loco, she's not a damaged boy like you who has to literally use children's cartoons for Japanese people to somehow figure out who he is as a person. She's just trying to watch for entertainment, mate. So I'd suggest to her maybe watch something good like Legends of the Galactic Heroes. She might enjoy that, a lot of
Shingeki no Kyojin.
Definitely not, right? As soon as you say the name in Japanese, you're out already.
I mean, I watched the first season of that, and it was all right. I heard it gets even worse, and I already kind of didn't like it that much. It was like entertaining, but not super in depth. So I'm not that interested in watching more than the first season. So.
Nah, fuck it, exactly. So anyway, put that to one side. Right, let's start out then By the way, Loco, just
What?
as an aside, asking her if she watches anime. Like, I don't know if you know anything about Kelsey's history, but before she was in esports, she actually used to write fanfics.
Oh my god, really?
So there you go. Like, do you really even need to ask that question? Like, what do you think the fucking overlap is between people like...
Not about anime.
No, but
yeah,
even
you're
so,
right,
the overlap's got to be crazy.
Oh my god.
Isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it is
people do
pretty.
fanfics and people watch anime. Like, I'd like to see the unicorn that's outside of that overlap, basically. So anyway, let's start with LEC, because I want to start not with the top teams, Kelsey, which is obviously, it's easy enough to start with the whole, is G2 still the best, is Fnatic star, I want to actually start with the team that's right near the bottom. It's the Rogue squad, who obviously, if you've seen recently, people already knew. They tried a bunch of different people. They'd had Finn in the top lane. They've obviously brought in Larson now for the mid lane instead of Senkox. But probably the most interesting one is they brought back probably the most reviled player in LEC at the moment, EQ, the guy that I've never heard anyone give a compliment to for fucking years at this point in time. It feels like he's always been the guy where people made out like he was the ultimate check stealer. Like, how does he stay in the league? You know, there's so many better players in national level. Now, I will say, it is motherfucking Ash time in the meta. And when it's Ash time in the meta, you may as well have EQ in the lineup, actually. As he saw from this game against Origin, Schalke, rather, he actually can play this champion. So what do you think about the Rogue squad at the moment? Because we've seen some potential from them. They've shown some interesting signs.
I think Rogue is kind of interesting. I think adding Larson to the lineup has changed their leadership structure, particularly. Allegedly, Larson does have a lot to do with comms, and they're bringing a lot of players who are kind of the more leadership, like Vander, from their Polish league team. I think allows them to kind of retain that identity, and you see a lot of the similar stuff that they used to do on Ultraliga, like roam through bot into mid, which is something that's really, really standard in Europe in general, right? But they will do it pretty well compared to teams like Splice is pretty awful at it. Teams like that, I think they're pretty good at controlling mid with bot prio or bot roams. So I think that if they're playing champions like Azir, which they played this weekend, this is a really easy way to play it. I think if you're requiring Larson to roam to side lanes or do anything like that, like G2 do, that's like kind of the next level of evolution that they haven't quite hit. But I think that their early game makes a lot of sense. They're not as creative with their map control as a team like Origin is, so they almost lost the game off of like Larson pushing another wave, for example, when Nukeduck was like, ha ha ha, I'm just gonna go mid, right? Which is just like, but why aren't you contesting the next wave top? Why are you just going mid like this? And that was like a more risky play, but a play that a more experienced player might make. So, yeah.
Because one of the things that's interesting about this team at the moment is it's very, very hard if you look at the bottom teams in LEC to actually know who's going to finish where, like who's going to be bottom, who's going to actually make a playoff run, because there's a whole bunch of teams that all have the potential to, but obviously only some of them can do it. Is Rogue going to be a team that you think can get a playoff spot?
Let's look at the standings. Actually, this is
they're third from bottom at the moment. They have 3 wins, and Misfits has 2, and XL has 1.
Yeah, I just want to see who I think they'd replace, I guess. If we're talking about
OG Fnatic G2, SK,
I guess SK was the team that was in playoffs last split, right? That they'd probably replace. So yeah, I think that they can make playoffs over SK for sure. I think SK have like a very sort of linear mode of approaching the game, and SK are actually really, really bad at pushing so that they have tempo before their play. So they'll basically always make a play that the enemy team can match. So I think that that's a huge weakness that playoff level teams shouldn't make, and it's actually surprising that they made playoffs last split. So I think they can easily make playoffs over SK. So.
What do you think of Rogue, Loco?
I think before Rift Rivals, I was like, Larson's pretty mechanically good. Inspired is pretty mechanically good, but they were making like a lot of rookie mistakes where they couldn't convert their leads. Like they could build these but do nothing with it. And then after Rift Rivals, I don't know what changed, but they look so coordinated. Like they can actually get shit done together, and Inspired just looks so much better than what he did before. So I'm not sure what clicked for them, but something clicked. Like they're the most improved team after Rift Rivals.
thing is, Inspired as well, by the way, if you don't know this, Loco, is literally like
17.
I think he's like 17 and a half or something crazy like that. He's one of the youngest players like we have at a pro level right now. So his potential looks really, really nice, actually. And I'd also add in the other part that has impressed me. Frankly, I've always rated this player anyway, but it's actually when they brought Vander back to the main squad. Like, what a great job he's doing. Like, he looks like he sets up half the map. Like, it looks like he's been a massive difference. So I think they're actually, the problem they have is them and XL, because they were like the laughing stock of the fucking league. People I notice, seem resistant to remove them from that category. But first of all, that laughing stock category is getting a lot of fucking welcome new members like Misfits right now, etc. So I think at this point in time, they're on the brink of getting out of that for me. Like, they should be a team contending for a playoff spot. They look decent. Even in the Schalke game, I think was the one they lost. Like, they had moments in this game that were looking fine. They just made an odd misplay now and then.
I don't know. I would say that maybe the difference between this and the Rift Rivals play is less to do with really rookie mistakes and more to do with just the teams they've played so far aren't really challenging anything beyond fundamentals, and their fundamentals are really strong. So yeah, they've played Schalke, they've played OG, but they won the game versus OG, I think, just due to setting up around mid properly. And in terms of the game they lost to Schalke, it's more what I would expect. So where they can't translate like their bot leads to mid, I think that's a challenge that they'll run into against a team that's really practiced at it, like Fnatic, or a team like G2 that just kind of, I mean, they don't even set up so that you can attack their mid lane. So I think that's where we'll kind of see them drop wins, and if they can kind of overcome that aspect of it, I think that they'll make playoffs, but I don't necessarily see that they've made like an insane improvement between pre-Rift Rivals and post-Rift Rivals, if that makes sense.
So last time, what is it? Case was on the episode. He sprouted some fucking bullshit, and he was like, oh, Rogue is better than TSM. Of course, right after he said it and he thought about it for a second, he took it right back because he knew there's zero truth in that. Just in the case you're also delusional, do you think Rogue is better than TSM?
As I already revealed at the start, that I don't really watch that much LCS. So I can tell you about.
I mean, some people don't watch LCS, but people still watch TSM. I know some people don't watch LCS, but everyone still watches TSM.
I watched the TSM game that 100 Thieves played against them, but it's about all I can tell you. Okay. So, I can't really comment on that, but I think that. Yeah, I can't really. I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth because I haven't watched enough TSM. Get back to me at the end of the season when I'm going to be reviewing more NA VODs before Worlds.
Yeah. Well done by the host there, who, if he'd been listening to the first 10 minutes of the episode, would have heard someone explicitly explain they're not watching LCS. Just go ahead and ask for a super hot take, like, comparison of the fucking like 6th place team in Europe with a top team in NA.
I know you.
No, I don't. Like, it's like
to make a lot of comparisons between teams that you don't watch Loco, but
wait, I watch all of you. I watch all of you, and I watch all of NA. And also, Doran, I don't watch tennis, but I caught the last match when like Roger Federer plays. You're gonna fucking watch. Like, even if you don't watch LCS, when TSM plays, people watch TSM.
This might be a crazy concept, Loco, but I have absolutely zero interest in your opinion on tennis, though, so I don't see where the analogy ends up there, because the analogy would be like if I knew you don't watch tennis and was like, so Loco, you think Rogue's better than Roger Federer's performance in the Wimbledon final? Like, that'd be about as interesting a question as what you just asked Kelsey there, and also anything that was said would be equally worthless from both parties. So what's amazing about that, Loco, I've never seen it done before, is you asked the first question that was absolutely worthless, that could only be answered by an answer that was absolutely worthless. So I don't know what you managed there, mate. You're a special breed, wherever you are. So anyway, what we'll do is this. Because of who these teams played recently, there's a really easy transition into talking about what was formerly a top team, which is Kelsey. One of the teams that obviously Rogue was able to beat was Origin. Origin's a team that, listen, if you looked at them on paper, I think a lot of people thought they would be maybe even stronger this split. Like, you looked at like the improvements they made after the spring. Instead, they've had a whole bunch of kind of underwhelming losses. I've heard some things behind the scenes about, like, Veteran has some theory that they're like experimenting with how they play around the jungle or some bullshit, which as soon as anyone has to start leaking stuff like that, like, I'm already getting worried when I hear stories like that, like that in official matches you're experimenting for some bizarre reason where I'm supposed to believe that it's okay that you lose the match now because in the future you'll somehow level up via some fucking like Dragon Ball Z logic to the next level. So give me your thoughts on Origin. Like, what's the problem basically? Why is this team not one of the top LEC teams at the moment?
So I don't really. I think that their early game fundamentals are usually pretty good, and I think most people would agree with that. But like their game that they played against Rogue, for example, they pretty much, and this is the game I most recently watched, so I'm going to refer to it a lot from either team, but it's like this game was, you had a kind of a volatile bot matchup, Ash Tom Kench versus Lux Sivir, and whoever plays around this matchup or just maintains control of this matchup can probably easily tilt the game in their favor. And Rogue, because obviously Rogue had priority in mid and then top lane also, so it was just really strange first to see Inspired go top, and then second to see basically no play from Cold near bottom lane or no effort to control River Vision near bot side. Obviously, it's hard to contest because Azir will just push for most of the game anyway versus Aatrox, but I think it was kind of weird for me to not identify that win condition or to identify that you could play effectively with Lux Sivir and try to force Azir to play more back by using that priority. So it was interesting that it went that way. Instead, they tried to reinforce Victor's control, and Victor just wants to sit top and farm anyway. So
I thought it was so fucking weird that they picked Aatrox early, and then Rogue picked Kennen, and they're like, we're gonna 200 IQ this and put Aatrox mid.
Locodoco was like, listen, mate, and all the matchups inside out me, I know them all. You think that's a good matchup? Just watch this. And then obviously just got ganked over and over and over again.
I just imagine it's fucking Nuke Dog.
I'll tell you what Nuke Dog's game was there, Loco. His game there was the equivalent of the first time. Like, this is an analogy I'll give to you because it's something you might actually be able to relate to in your life, mate.
Okay.
Nuke Dog's attempt to play that lane out was like when you first get a girl that you know and you agree you're going to play the game and you try and your hardest to like, I'm really sure I'm really good at the game. And then the problem is every mistake you make is getting like triple tilted in your brain because you're like, shit, I'm looking fucking bad. I've got to get it all back. And it's like every time he was getting ganked, I was like, this is going to go so badly every time. This is going to be the worst. This champion's going to do absolutely nothing in this game.
But
that was brutal.
It was just so weird that it's Nuke Duck. He's supposed to be champion Ocean, and then he's opting into this matchup. I'm like, really? Aatrox into Azir? Is it that good? And also like Victor into Kennen? Is it really that good? Like so many people just play out the Aatrox Kennen matchup, and I'd imagine Nuke Duck has confident picks he can pick into Azir. I was just like baffled by that decision making, and Nuke Duck played like ass pretty much the whole game after he got ganked.
I think I wouldn't necessarily put this down to drafting error because I think you can play Aatrox into Azir, but like I said, I do think that mid control, like no matter what you put against Azir, more or less, you're probably not going to get prio mid. You're just not. So I think that the reasoning was that they felt more confident with Nuke Duck playing this like really overpowered champion than with someone else playing it. Like they just would rather have Nuke Duck play it than Alphari or something along those lines. I mean, technically their first rotation in any of those three could be sole laners, right? So they had a lot of options, but they wanted to put Nuke Duck mid. I'm not saying on Aatrox, I'm not saying Alphari is like bad champion pool. They also tried to rotate the matchup, I think. If I recall the game correctly, they tried to put Nuke Duck top after a bit.
They did after a couple.
Yeah, so I think that was...
They actually put Nuke Duck in side lanes a couple of times, I noticed.
I think maybe that was the initial plan, was just to do it, but the first play around mid stalled out their game plan. So, yeah, I don't know. Because obviously Victor versus Azir doesn't really have that much of a fun time early on. Sure. But after a few rotations, we can put Victor mid and he'll just like wave clear and he'll keep mid prio. They have a lot of options for keeping mid prio in the mid to late game, which is why I think like the Sivir Lux versus Ash Tom Kench matchup should be really crucial because eventually Sivir gets to a point where she just like W's the wave and the wave is gone. So I think
the Lux early was also really weird. I just didn't understand OG's draft.
How is Lux early weird? Aatrox Lux is actually a really common rotation.
Really?
I don't think it's strange. Lux is a really strong champion. Also, yeah, I'm not gonna say too much more about it, but it's not weird. So I
feel like for OG, like taking Aatrox first pick Azir, and then Aatrox Flux. What was the reply from? It was Azir, Aatrox Flux. What was the reply from
Olaf Cannon.
Olaf Cannon? And then did they reply Victor straight there? So it's two
Yeah,
solo
it was
lane.
Victor on 3.
You like that? Or
Is that weird? I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I think Victor into Kennen is a decent matchup. I think that in order to do that, they probably had a pretty clear game plan with how they wanted to deal with the Azir, which is just kind of like bleed out early and then rotate Victor when he can just kind of wave clear. But Rogue didn't allow them to get to that point in the game, so I think that they had a clear early game plan based on this draft, would be my guess. And then it just couldn't go through because of the way Rogue played. And I think part of that is that they fucked up in controlling the bot side.
So when you have like teams like Splice first pick Azir, I'd imagine a lot of teams in Europe are first picking Azir. And if I'm a team like OG, right, I think one of my biggest strengths is how many counter picks Nukeduck has. So
First of all, when you say teams like Splice are first picking Azir, that doesn't necessarily indicate that all teams in Europe are first picking Azir, because one, they have humanoid, and two, like Azir fits perfectly into the Splice style of play. So yeah,
but I don't know if other teams are doing it in scrims, but if there are multiple teams first picking Azir, I'd expect that's something OG prepped for. So if first pick Azir happens, I'd much rather see something like Aatrox jungle, and then third pick AD, and because it's Nukeduck, let him get banned out, and then 10th pick the counter pick into it, and keep the Aatrox flex all the way alive until 10th pick.
What counter pick are you going to pick into Azir that you need to wait all the way until last pick for? Especially
Secret
if
Caps Talon pick.
Like, obviously, we are seeing some teams like flex the Azir to top lane, but I also think that OG are flexible enough with their chips that whatever they pick specifically to match the Azir, they can flex up to top side also. But there's not like some champion some secret Azir counter pick most likely that you're gonna wait until the last pick for, especially if Rogue just show all three of their solo lanes like that. Show both of their solo lanes like this.
I mean, if they show
being as we're not going to bring Path in on a fucking four-way here. Let's just abandon the draft part of this discussion there, Loco. I feel like it's not going that well. But let's do this.
Okay. This is NA Analyst Desk segment. This is what I expect. If you don't actually watch the game, you just talk about the draft. You know, that's kind of fun.
Wait, I literally watched all the game. Wait.
It was a joke. It was a harmless joke, coach. Right? Go by, float on by. Here's the question for you, Loco. Why do you think Origin's in a slump? You think they're in trouble, mate?
I don't know. When we get to like teams like Origin, when we get to teams like G2, when we get to teams like TL, and they have bad games, I don't want to be like, oh, they're bad because of this. Oh, they're bad because of this. Like when teams have such a long time of like sustained level at the top, I watch games like this, and I feel like any kind of comment regarding, oh, they're bad or they're slumping is overreaction.
Okay.
So I don't think OG's bad. Like I just cannot call like certain teams at certain levels, if they have bad regular season games, bad. Especially after when we see shit like OG at Rift Rivals, TL at Rift Rivals, like G2 at Rift Rivals, where G2 had pretty like mediocre Rift Rival considering like what their actual level is. So like these regular season games, I think it's really fucking hard to just like, why is OG bad?
If you're gonna bring in Rift Rivals, how many games do you see where, I guess G2 is a bad example, but let's say OG. How many games do you see where they put Patrick mid in LEC?
None.
Exactly. So I don't know if Rift Rivals is a best. Mithy came out and said that they legit have never played Taliyah Pantheon before, right? They just wanted to see how it went. They thought that Rift Rivals was a perfect setting to just...
I mean, I think his logic is just that they performed better in that setting. And he's thinking, basically, since they've got a bunch of veteran players and they were a very good team, he's kind of thinking that, like, it's like, you know, they're going to drop some games in the regular season, but then, you know, it'll all come together and you'll all be great in the playoffs and they'll peak at that point in time. That might be an implausible... narrative if you think it's incorrect. Do you think there are fundamental problems they have right now that actually stop them being good?
I think I would say that Origin probably will ramp up because there's a lot of experience, and then just even I do think that their draft plans show a lot of thoughtfulness. It's just that they're mis-executing for whatever reason, and maybe what you mentioned before about them experimenting with new ways to play stuff that they think will make them bad short run is accurate, but I think what they're doing now is that they're just they're not creating enough of a buffer to combat for how hard some teams who are just playing like the same way in the early game to combat like them snowballing against that. Like for example, against Excel, they obviously they also picked, you know, both their solo lanes 1, 2, 3, Vayne, you know, flex. But I think if you see Mordekaiser, if you're first picking Mordekaiser and you see Vayne in 1, 2, 3, you don't think that that's going to be a bot lane Vayne. You probably assume that that's going to be a Vayne top. So I don't think, especially if, you know, XL are picking Mordekaiser Corki, maybe they want to put Corki bot or something, but I doubt XL would do that. So yeah, it's they have like clear early game plans, and they're like, okay, well, they're gonna first pick Azir, they're gonna first pick Mordekaiser, and I think like the more I think about this Victor Aatrox setup, the more I think that my initial thought is correct, and that they plan to have like Victor survive early until Victor get to a point where he can just auto clear the wave, and then Aatrox survive and go top, and then just kind of farm in a side lane until he gets to monster Aatrox state and just gets every reset in the team fight and takes over. But yeah, I think they're doing this, but they're just kind of not giving enough of a buffer, or they don't have enough of a good proactive plan. And even saying proactive feels weird because it's such a loaded term, but they don't have enough. They're not executing well to allow themselves to get to a point where their draft makes sense. If that makes, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that they will actually be a team that does contend with G2 for the title, though, based on what you've seen so far?
It's really hard to say that because right now G2 just look like they're actually just fucking around, right? And they're still winning most of their games. They just feel like a team that's fucking around. And then, as I said, I think there are teams like Rogue or that have a really good idea of how they want to play out the early game, but it's pretty static. And this is the rule. It's like every time a lot of NA teams, for example, they really want to contest the mid wave, and if they're not mid in time for the mid wave, they lose their shit or something along those lines. So playing around that concept, you know, Rogue will always play a certain way. You know, this team will always play a certain way. Whereas G2, yeah, they have some systems that are really, really readable, but they've gotten to, it's like, okay, if they can make a level 3 run, they will. If they identify this plan, they'll make it. Whereas I think that gives them a lot more freedom and a lot more kind of, the way they play is just way more free, I guess, and way less predictable overall than some of the other teams in LEC. So it's really hard to say this team will match up well, because I can really, really easily categorize play styles and game plans for Origin, but I don't feel the same way about G2, for example. So
okay. Right, Loco, let's just transition and talk about G2 then. Mm-hmm. What do you think of them at the moment?
I think there's such a stark contrast between G2 and TL, and I know people are going to be like, oh, why are you comparing G2 and TL? I think easily G2 and TL are the best team in their region, with like a significant gap behind 1 and 2. And how TL's treating NALCS versus how G2's treating LEC is so different, where TL almost feels, I feel like, bored a lot of times, and like they don't really care about LCS because they're just so much fucking better. Where G2 is also in the same boat regarding being so much better than rest of Europe, but they're enjoying themselves a lot more, and they're actually trying stuff, they're experimenting. It's yeah, that's like the biggest thing that stood out to me about G2. When like teams, like mega teams like this go into regular season, they usually get bored and they usually do play sloppy. And G2's dealing with it in a way where I haven't seen teams like deal with it in this way.
I agree with Kelsey though. Like, I don't know how any, like, I don't even know. I think that's actually the hardest team to categorize that's probably ever played League of Legends, because you don't even know what draft they're going to do in a game. Like, how are you supposed to game plan for what the win conditions are, which player they're going to play around? You can't know any of that going into the draft. In fact, sometimes you don't even know after the first couple of picks. Like, look at this game they just played against Schalke, where it was fucking Silas Jungle that was killing people with a fucking Jinx ultimate across the map. And then Caps playing a champion that looks like it was invented for him, because all you do is just fuck around all over the map 24/7 and then waste people's time, draw their attention away. And if you remember, at one point in time, they were literally like doing the fucking Baron or something while he was like fucking keeping 2 people low part of the map. So I don't know how you play against this squad. It looks impossible. The problem is, though, to be fair, I will say this. what they're doing shouldn't work. It's just that they have such high-level players, they can somehow execute half this shit they're making up on the fly. So I don't even blame the other teams. It actually should be a very inconsistent style of play, but somehow they win most of the games, as she said.
Can I ask what you mean by it shouldn't work?
I think it like trying to pull that like impromptu players off like that all over the map, like because you can tell basically that sometimes when they draft for like a specific comp at a certain point in the game, basically, and they're not doing it thinking, well, we're going to just get ahead early and this guy's going to win this lane, and then once we're not like they're not doing that. That's the way every other coach has been setting up the game for years. They're doing stuff like, well, I'll pick this because it works well where you're going to pick that. That's going to be cool, and then they just make it work. Like, I feel like they must be the team, right, where if you could pause the game after the draft and then pause it 5 minutes into the game and then pause it 10 minutes into the game, I bet the answers they would give you or what they were thinking they were going to do in the game would be different at every 5 minute point completely. They wouldn't just go in with one game plan that they're still sticking to and trying to navigate towards, and this is delayed us a bit. Like, what do you think, Kelsey? What do you think?
Let me give a point on the G2 prep stuff. So when I think a lot of teams prep, like they usually prep within certain boxes and certain parameters regarding, oh, this is going to happen in draft, so we're going to practice this way, like we're going to pick this and they're going to pick that. So they prep really deep. They go through situations a lot and nothing really surprises them because a lot of times draft is more of a formality where I do this, you do that, and I counter with this. Where G2, I don't think they prep with a lot of depth. It feels like they prep really wide and they don't really care about what you're going to do. And they're like, we're going to run this. Maybe they prep to a certain degree of like, we're going to pick this and then they'll pick this. And then they have so many variations of like different things they'll do. Their prep doesn't feel really deep, but it feels so wide and it feels like they're picking from any of the options.
I think I don't necessarily agree with that because I feel like they just plan certain picks for certain picks, and then they come up with some. Maybe the composition will work, and maybe it won't. Like for example, they've been Ezreal and pick Zyragon. It makes a lot of sense. They pick Sylas jungle, like Sylas is one of the new jungle champion, the new hotness jungle champions. Okay, they pick Victor into Nico, makes sense. They pick Talon into Azir, makes sense. Like these are picks they're prepping for things. Like Talon also, you have to have an AD pick if you have Zyragon already, and if you have like Sylas Victor, like it makes sense to get Talon mid or an AD mid if you have an AP solo and an AP top, because otherwise your entire top side is AP. So I think that they do have picks prepped for certain picks, and it's not that weird. It's just that the depth of each of their champion pools and what they're willing to do is somewhat unexpected.
For most teams, I feel like they have like one or two situations where they're prepped for, and they try to make it so it goes into one or two situations. Where G2's more so like, okay, here's like 8 different situations we're going to be comfortable with, and let's try to get into any of these 8. But all those 8 situations aren't planned out really deeply, where most teams are like, okay, these 1 or 2 situations we understand really well, and we want to force it into this, and we want to go into something we really know.
I mean, it really depends on the team. I think that 1 of 2 situations pretty accurate to some teams, but other teams will prep more wide and they'll just have certain picks that work into this, and if we get this pick, then we can make this comp. It's kind of setup. So I don't necessarily agree. I do also think that there's a very different prep mentality. I don't know how to put this. I think maybe there's a different prep mentality afforded when your players have really good matchup practice in solo queue. When your players have really good matchup practice in solo queue, the way you prepare drafts can be very different. Whereas I feel like that might be a big difference between how some LCS teams prepare and how some LEC teams prepare.
When you say this, like, what's the distinction? Like for example, let's say in a normal draft, the player just says, like, yeah, I can play champion X, so we'll say Azir in this case. Like in this scenario, are you implying if Cap says, yeah, but I actually can play all these like matchups that are supposed to be losing in Azir, but I can play it if we need to? Is it along those lines?
I think it's more like people will know how people like a lot of I feel like G2 players have a really good idea of how matchups play out just in general. So it isn't necessarily that so for example, let's say that you one team picks Aurelia, and then if you know Renekton can beat Aurelia in lane, right? But your top laner might have played that matchup a million times, and maybe your mid laner hasn't, or vice versa, right? So if you pick Renekton, then you're in a situation where either if they pick Aurelia mid, then and counter pick Renekton, then you can either have your top laner go mid, which some teams are willing to do, or you have your mid laner like just completely flip it on the matchup. Whereas I think G2's players are all kind of flexible and willing to do almost anything. So if there's I think Talon into Azir is a good matchup, but most people haven't played Talon for a while. So are they willing to just play Talon like this? Or also Caps is someone who plays like almost every champion in mid when it comes out, like a bunch of different games, doing a bunch of different like coin flip stuff. So like this kind of mentality, I think, is good for allowing you to understand how almost any matchup goes. So if like a pick makes sense, even if you haven't practiced it that week, or you haven't practiced it in a month, or you haven't practiced it in a year, you can just pull it out. And I feel like G2's players a lot of times have that flexibility, whereas a lot of other teams might not feel as comfortable. It's like, well, yeah, but I haven't played this in scrims recently. I don't know how it will feel, so I don't want to risk it, right? So I feel like that's kind of a difference between how G2 play and then how even some other teams in LEC play, and even some other teams in other regions or other places play. So yeah.
I think you have to throw into that as well, because it's an obvious like side factor. I think allows that to happen. What you just described is, if you have a team like G2, there is no one player who has to carry the game. There's no one who has to be the best player in the server for G2 to win this match. Well, that's not the case for most teams that play in any region. So as a result, there's also going to be scenarios where, yeah, maybe in theory, this super duper mid laner in whatever region could say, I could take this champion if I haven't played it much just because it helped the comp. But why would he if he's the primary carry? He's probably not going to. He's probably going to say, nah, give me one of these 3 comfort picks that I will win my lane on. I will do well. So I think if you have to add that in as well, because that's obviously the thing about G2 that I think makes it so hard to categorize them, is they have so many of these players that have versatility, and then they have so many players that have been a carry and have therefore know that the other guy can carry the game for them. So it's like, what a unique set of like just minds to think about draft as well as the coaching staff, you know.
Some of the things they do is so disrespectful, and they're just so confident and like they can pull it off. So they picked Vayne Yuumi into Sivir Nautilus, I think, in their last match or the second last match, one of the matches. And then, I mean, people don't do that because if you ever lose mid and jungle prio, or if you're ever like in a situation where you can get dope, it's a fucking nightmare situation for the Vayne side versus a Sivir where you can get constantly pushed in. They just had full confidence, like, we're going to win the mid jungle side, and like we're never going to be in that situation. And that situation never came, where other teams like bot lanes would not opt into that. Like the moment like AD carry sees that, they're like, no, this is way too fucking dangerous. Where G2, they're willing to take the risk, and they're just willing to do things like some teams never ever would even fucking imagine.
I think, obviously Sivir can push, but maybe Yuumi can get put. Like, it's such a weird matchup because obviously Vayne can play into Sivir. But I also think that, okay, they're picking Renekton into earlier. This is pretty extreme, right? In terms of they're probably going to get prio made. So you can, as long as your game plan is protect weak side, accelerate mid to top and protect weak side. If weak side is vocal about when they can be dove, then I think it's not too terrible. The one concern I would have with this draft is more on the wave clear side. If you're like, I think that's a bigger thing than. And
there's a lot of problem with it, and G2 is just like willing to do it, where so many of the players would just complain about, no, I'm not going to do this, where they're just all gung-ho about it, and it's not even like one person like, oh, we should do this. It's just everyone's like, okay, let's do it. All right, let's just have fun. Like, if you guys feel it, let's just do it.
I don't even know if it's disrespect. I just think they are willing to try more stuff, and they're willing, and they will practice a wider variety of stuff. Like, I imagine being in scrims with G2, it's just, okay, this pick is good here, I'm going to play this pick. And then maybe there's not even a gold, and they just have a lot of fun, and they're experimenting with a bunch of different stuff. So that's kind of like how I've heard G2 scrims characterized, where it's just like they're kind of like just fucking around, and then they're testing what matchups they think will be good, and if this comp works, then this comp works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, and that's why you see like what people refer to as weird fucking G2 drafts come on stage like they did at MSI. So yeah, I think sometimes they can get like a little too into themselves, or a little too ahead of themselves with their drafts, but other times I think it's like really good that they feel that flexible and that confident. And I think that if you can play like that, obviously that's the ideal, right? My player can play anything, so draft is so fucking easy. So
Exactly. G2's basically the rare example of a couple who actually are both 100% open to the idea of being swingers, Loco. You hear this, mate? Because the problem, obviously, in that scenario is the last thing you want is one person to sort of be saying they're into it because they think the other one is, or, be like, well, okay, I'm into it, but it has to be a certain type of girl, or, she can't look at me while you're looking at me, or whatever the normal restrictions people. And the problem with that is that's going to make it like really difficult to navigate that already tricky scenario. But if both people are both just really open, they've got a really healthy view towards themselves, maybe they can just have fun. They can just, fuck around, try stuff. If it doesn't work out, whatever, next week it'll be different. It'll be all the fun of the family. So that cuts
a little too deep right now, because I recently went through a heartbreak where there was problems with exclusivity, so I can't do this right now.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll just go ahead and tell all the women out there, I wouldn't expect exclusivity from Locodoco for at least, I'd say, the next 20 years. Like, beyond that, I can't judge him, 20 years. I give anyone a chance to change in 20 years. That's a life sentence in prison. So, you know what, Loco, if you start hitting the weights now, if you start reading your Bible, you pass your GED, I reckon you can make it, mate. We can rehabilitate you. One day, you two could pack bags in a grocery, maybe a farm, maybe not even a normal supermarket, a Trader Joe's. Mm-hmm. You could be a more upmarket backpacker Loco. But you've got to start now, son. You've got to turn your life around now. You all need Jesus badly. But anyway, Kelsey, when we were doing the MSI episode, you made the provocative statement that you actually thought, this was at the time when IG was just wrecking the group stage and everyone was raving like they were the best team in the world. You said you actually thought G2 had the best actual like sense for how to play the game. Like they seemed to understand the game the best at the time. I'm going to go ahead and assume you probably have a similar opinion, right? Because at the moment, what's obviously been blowing everyone's minds is how unreal their mid-game is, where even if they start down, even if they have a goal deficit, their numbers, just the stats for what they're doing in the mid-game are unbelievable. So do you still hold that opinion? Are they the team that understand the game as it is fundamentally the best?
Yeah, I still think that. I think the reason why I made this statement is I think that IG played to early game win conditions at the time played to early game win conditions the best Fnatic team, but sure. G2 probably second best, and then their mid game was the best. Late game, I forget who I think SKT, but I still felt like G2 is second best late game. So it's like, okay, talking about all of the different parts of the game, evening out, G2 have overall the best fundamentals. I still think that that's probably the case. I obviously I haven't watched as much NA recently, but of LCK, LPL, LEC, yeah, I still think that that's the case. So,
what are they so good at in the mid game?
Like there are some really interesting plays that they'll make. So they're usually, first of all, they're on top of making sure that they control the midsection, and they'll make really really simple plays like, okay, Victor is going to reset here, right? For example, in their most recent game, Victor is going to reset here. Perks is just not going to show, right? Perks is not going to show in Fog bottom. So they might think because Victor is on reset that they can walk up and get mid prio here. But, Perks is in Fog, Caps is in Fog. So they can't walk up because they'll still lose the mid prio contest. So, I think this is kind of like way of thinking about making sure we get mid-prio so that we can set up for objectives first. Like a lot of teams will think, oh, I have to back up as soon as I see the gray icon for the dragon or the gray icon for the baron, right. So that like that's 1 minute timer, right? Before that objective. A lot of teams will think that that's a good time to back and get vision and set up for those objectives. I feel like G2 actually backs like on average 2 to 130. And then sets up, make sure that they get control beforehand. They're thinking in the game in a much more objective-based way, and the way that they get control of waves is pretty creative. Because they're able to get ahead on the map like this and secure vision first and push waves first, they're almost always able to maintain that control because they have so many more options on how to do it. So I think that that's something that makes G2 really strong in the mid game.
You know, Loco, just as an aside, one thing I fucking love about League of Legends is it has the same problem with fans that every game I've ever followed that was a team sport has, which is in almost every single game, the best thing you can be the best at and practice the most and refine the most is just the fundamentals of the game. So in League of Legends, famously, the one that used to tilt me was literally 5 years ago. I used to hear plebs tell me, like, stop talking about frog and farming. Every mid laner can farm. It's like, mate, to this day, he's still a better farmer than like fucking 8 people in LCS's mid laner. Like, people haven't caught up on that angle because obviously he's not just killing minions only. Well, similarly, if you just take what are now the most famous analyst buzzwords, resets, wave manipulation, etc. Like, the amount of pro teams that are still very, very underwhelming in these areas is unbelievable. Meanwhile, you go and look at the best teams, and when you take out having the best players and making all the highlight kills and all the shit that like a pleb gets off on, like the highlight clip, what actually makes them the best is these fundamentals. It's things like understanding when you're supposed to back so that you can set your jungler up for something else. It's understanding, actually, don't take that last wave. Like, that's not going to make sense for where the waves will be when we come back in 2 minutes. Like, these basic things really are what I'm imagining most coaches around the world are still pounding everyone with. Like, it's actually, there's so many more basic things people could work on that isn't as advanced as they think. But the problem is everyone thinks they've got it nailed already. They all think, well, I've been a pro for years. It's like, it's not like that, mate. Because the key secret is this, right, Loco? The reason why in all these sports and games I've followed, the fundamentals are always so important is exactly because once someone gets a decent understanding, they think it's like learning to ride a bike, and they're like, right, well, I never need to do that again. It's like, no, you have to maintain that. That's the whole point. And in fact, even the way that you do a fundamental thing will change over time as people's technique improves. People's understanding and paradigm of when to do this thing will change. So that's another flaw you have. That's one of the reasons why I'm always impressed with the like brainy players, but who can keep adapting through the years. They don't just stay years back in the past, as I think certain people probably have at times, sadly. So what do you think on that, Loco? A bit abstract.
Yeah, but for fundamentals, right, like wave control reset, like we talk about this, but there's a lot of different ways people do things, and not every team does it the same way. And due to limitations on certain players, like, because let's say there's a most efficient way to do this, but to do this most efficient way, like the difficulty level is like a 90, right? And then there's way 2 to do it, but the difficulty level is like a 70. Even though way 1 is just realistically better, if your team can't do it every single time, and if you just can't do it every single time, it's better to learn it as way 2 and just do it every single time and never mess it up on stage. And you learn it as way 2, and then you get another teammate, and then this time he doesn't know this. And also, as the patch changes and as the game changes, and there are certain champions that come into the meta that break the rule completely, right? So a lot of times, like, League is a game with very few absolute truths, and what is the most viable is always some changing, and there's always like a bullshit champion that comes in and that changes those rules. And then there's sometimes players that fucking do shit that shouldn't be possible, and it also changes it too.
Of course.
I think so. The basic fundamentals of the game stay the same, and obviously your understanding of how to get better at them, I think, improves over time, and that's been true for years. But you can't necessarily. Even Riot have tried to introduce changes to waves and crap like this that haven't really changed that much the basic fundamentals of the game.
I'm sure there is few absolute truths, but the things around it
and
is changing.
And stuff that I'm saying the G2 does well at are not things that have changed. They've just, their coordination around these things is better. And arguably, yeah, they're in a better position early than a lot of teams to execute them. But that's not even always true, right? Because they will int their leads for some reason. Sure. Like, Wonder will put the ward in the wrong spot and die, and then they can't play around that win condition anymore for a while. But like the G2 versus Vitality game from last season is one of like the most, for me, the games for G2 that sticks out the most. Not because I thought Vitality played particularly well or whatever, but because it's like Wonder got put so far behind, but if they play out the 1-3-1, like their comp can win the game. And then they are always backing it, like way ahead of Vitality to secure objective vision. Vitality are like obviously fucking up a lot, but G2 would just like keep a good firm grasp of fundamentals even from behind relative to a team like Vitality that was always also ranked pretty highly in the LEC. Obviously, I think they didn't really grow as a team, and that's part of the reason why they're struggling now. But just at that time, it was like really impressive to see that G2 can even play this way from the behind, just because they remained tasked with fundamentals and remained focused on these fundamentals. So I think that for me is just like, you can argue that. I mean, fundamentals don't. If you are saying that fundamentals change too much,
No, I'm saying there is
totally
absolute. No, I'm saying there's absolute truth in the game, but things around it change.
Yeah, I think that things around it change, but like, okay, let's put it this way. I would categorize different types of knowledge into like fundamentals knowledge. So like how the waves work, how towers function, whatever, like how when objectives spawn, all this sort of thing. Champion knowledge. So just like what, by that I mean like what your champion wants to do in the game to succeed. So not even matchups or anything like that, but just like how your champion wants to win the game, and then like matchup knowledge. So if you can put these things together, then I think that that's the best way to do it. And then you can break all of these things down into individual parts. And if you have a good understanding of each one of them, you can adapt to any situation. But they are separate concepts. So yeah, a broken champion can come in and change the way that you're doing something. But if you understand that champion and you understand its matchups, then you can work it into how the game fundamentals work still. So...
Because the thing I've noticed is basically, like I alluded to there, unfortunately, to the beginner or just a casual player or fan, the thing that'll always draw your eye is the crazy high-skilled, super amazing plays, the equivalent of, the basketball 360 dunk or someone making an outrageous tennis shot right down the line, But what they don't realize is almost every one of these instances, even where you get the person who does that, that's just what put them over the top and made them absolutely the best player. What made them a really good player was the absurdly good fundamentals. Like, for example, if you want to use an example you referenced earlier there, Loco, Roger Federer is one of the best shot makers ever in tennis, but he also has outrageously good footwork. Like, if you were trying to teach someone how to move on a tennis court, you'd try and show them what he does in his footwork, but like, you would even have to tell them, you won't be able to do half this shit. Like, he's just at the absolute peak of like, this technique's perfect, moves correctly here. Like, some of that shit you can practice, you should, but you'll never be at that level. Because the thing for me that people underrate with the G2 squad is like, it's so easy to look at all the team fighting and all the crazy kills and think, oh, how can anyone beat this team? But it's like, it's the mentality to even go for some of the players that is mind-blowing to me. Because if you look at a team like Origin, they have players that are good enough where if they had this mindset, they could do a bunch of these things. Maybe they wouldn't execute all of it at the same high level, but they could go for a lot of the same plays G2 does. But Origin, I picked them as a stark contrast. They would never even think to go for some of these players. And in fact, you could argue their philosophy is the opposite. It's like, we don't want to go for risky players in this scenario. If we can wait for the 55-45 one instead, go for that. Let's wait. Let's hold up. In fact, we've got a lead. Why risk it? They have a completely different paradigm of how they think. So it's not even about whether Origin's players could pull the play off. Maybe they could, but to them, that play doesn't even exist. It's already like X'd out on the board of what they're picking from, So I think you've got to give extra props to G. It's not just that they have the best players. It's not just that they have super high skill level. They also have, actually, seemingly, the coaching staff must have done some real work with how the players want to think about the game, how they transition from one part of a game to another. I would even guess how they communicate, because it can't just be 5 people just shouting random, oh, go for this, oh, no, what about that? I'm going to do... No, there's no way. Like, there must be a hierarchy of these things within it. I mean, I know as a coach, Kelsey, people who've coached, like, it can't be as easy as the finished product looks at the end.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all players start from a different point one on a team, but yeah, it's rarely really simple. But I do think that they have picked up players with a pretty good idea of how to play the game, and then at that time, a lot of times it's like guiding them correctly to come to their own conclusions. Because if you just tell them this or that, they might not even understand it. Whereas like the way G2 plays, the reason why I will respect the coaching staff for that is just because whatever means that they got to it from there, whether it's player driven or coaching driven, like, it was facilitated really well enough that they just seem to demonstrate a really good, deep understanding of different types of the game. So they aren't just being like told what to do. So we have this set play at this point. They understand like the plays that they want to make, and so that they can add a bunch of different ones and a bunch of different if-then conditions. Like, I don't know if Caps goes into the game expecting enemy Aurelia to die in a level 2 all-in. But, you know, once that happens, it's like, I'm immediately going top lane and we're going to kill this guy too. Actually, it wasn't Aurelia that he was playing as. He walked top and killed the Aurelia, but you know what I mean. So.
By the way, are you someone, because I wanted to check on this as well. So obviously now that we've had MSI and we've had the first split and we're into the second one now, do you actually hold Caps as some unique player compared to others? Like, for example, if I went back in time, at say 2 year spans from now, and I go back to 2016 and maybe Perks is the best mid, and I go 2 years before that, and I mean at this point in time I guess, I don't know, Febiven or someone is that, and then I go 2 before that and it's Expeke, right? Is he just the latest version of the best EU mid laner, or do you actually hold him as some extra special, preternaturally, you know, unique player? For you, Kelsey.
Oh, sorry, Caps? Or...
Yeah. Is he unique in terms of all the players you've seen?
I think he's pretty unique in terms of, like, there's a specific quality about him that's really hard to find. And that quality is, like, everyone will look at his solo queue account and see, okay, he's going 0-10 this game or whatever the fuck he's doing. And then he'll, like, Caps in solo queue is just a really coin flip type thing. And that's because he's approaching solo queue with, it's like, how far can I push this? And he just practices how far can I push this and this question over and over. I remember, I think it was 2016 was his debut, right?
Yeah, first year was his, yeah.
Yeah, and then 2016, it was like you would talk to mid laners about Caps, and it was like, oh god, this guy's just like so insane. And
maybe it was 2017. Was I wrong on that one? Was it 2017?
Oh yeah, it was 2017.
Yes, I think it was 2017.
Yeah, because 2016 was H2K and then H2K Worlds, and then yeah.
Yes, okay.
2017, so 2017 Caps debut, and like all these mid laners, if you talk to them at the time, would be like, oh my gosh, this guy's so insane in X, Y, and Z. And then you would see like his very first game, he dies like 3 times, right? In lane. And the fact that he kept going with that mentality, even though the entire narrative around him at the time was, yeah, he's really insanely mechanically talented, but but he isn't stable and he hasn't learned how to like stabilize the wave or proper lane management in this sense, or he doesn't know how to not take the 50-50 play when the jungle is nearby and all this sort of stuff. He just kind of had the confidence and the quality to just keep going with this kind of mentality and thinking that, yeah, he could fucking make this good, right? He could make this work. Like, this was his optimal way of playing. And I think that quality is really rare because you're surrounded by people all the time. And obviously, I'm not advocating that everyone listen to criticism, yes, right? And not listen to them and tell them that what they're doing is like boosted and coin flip. But like, he was confident that he could make this work and that he had enough skill to make this work. And I think that that's really, really rare and really ballsy and really impressive, right? Obviously, if he just kept inting every game, I wouldn't be saying this. But
No. I don't know. Have I, at Loco, if I've ever told this story before, let me know. But basically, I have told this story in relation to Caps, but I can't remember if it was on this show or not. But basically, it's exactly the same as what happened with the person who was currently the best player in CSGO, a Ukrainian player called Simple, which is a very similar
doing
story.
Crazy shit.
He came along, and very early in his career, it was clear that he was like mechanically unbelievably good. And so as a result, when he played the game, he would play about as aggressively as it's possible to play. And so, for example, in Counter-Strike, he'd even do things that were considered like cardinal sins, like
peeking with AWP, right?
Like with the AWP, a weapon that normally you want to be stationary, you want to get you want to be the person who's like stood still the first to fire accurately. He would like aggressively peek in at angles where it's like in a normal scenario you'll die there or you'll give up a position too early. And the point is exactly what you're saying here, Kelsey. Everyone told this guy, coaches, teammates, even all the analysts used to say, he should just play less effectively. In fact, I'll even tie it into the Caps example. It's like what I used to hear about Caps back then, which is like, right, well, we know this guy's got a playmaking mentality and he's got this really high level. So, once he learns how to play as a pro, and, he limits some of that and he knows when not to go for plays, then he'll be the best player. Well, obviously the joke is Caps didn't do that. Simple didn't do that. What they did is they went, like, there's a famous line, I know it's from that 9 Inch Nails song, which is, I think it's from a Robert Frost poem, which is called "The Way Out is Through," and that was like the mentality these guys had, which is like, no, the way I'm going to get to my nth level is I'm going to keep going as far as possible with this. And actually, even though you're normally right, someone as skilled as me, if we just made like took 20% risk off it, I'd just be the best player immediately. I'd have like the all-around game. Instead, I'm going to become the best player who goes for the players. Like, this is the best way of explaining it. There's a great quote that says something like, a very good player hits a shot no one else can hit. A genius hits a shot no one else even knows exists. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the best way to describe it. Because the idea is, if you are like, I would give the best example, Kelsey, is I would say the counter is like Nuke Dog. For me, Nuke Dog generally is that player. He's the one who, if he wanted to, he could go for some of these crazy Caps players. But most of the time, he's going to just stick within his lane, and he's going to say, I know what my champion is. I know I'm ahead slightly in CS. If there's not an ideal scenario presents itself, why go for the risk, The point is, Caps is doing what would absolutely int the whole game. And as you say, the problem must be, and this is why I'm always very interested with him, with the way that he came through a different coaching staff each year, basically, because most coaches would tell you, if you're a player, that stop that now. Like, if you were Korean, you'd never be allowed to do it. It's one of the reasons I've given this theory already. It's one of the reasons I think the Shy is so amazing, because he played in China. I think if he'd have been in Korea, some coach would have ruined him. I mean, for all I know, maybe he'd be better, but it's hard to imagine, because he did the same thing. He went to the ultimate limit of what you can do mechanically in the game. So unfortunately, they're players where it's like, the joke is like this. This is what we always say in Counter-Strike. We always say, if you're a beginning player, don't watch what Simple's doing and attempt any of it. Like, you can't do any of it, and it'll make you way worse, in fact. Instead, what you want to watch the player who's the equivalent of, like, in our game, it'd be like this play called Zipnix. Mm-hmm. It's like, he always just makes the smart play. He always makes the correct play. He's like the coach's dream. He always does the play he's supposed to do. Even if it doesn't win, it's like, even if he loses, in your brain, the coach could go, that was right, though. You meant to do it that way. Mm-hmm. Caps, obviously, that's why he's such an enigma, right? Because I kind of agree. I would never tell anyone to play this way. But I will say, though, from knowing exceptionally talented people like that, that's why it's so tough with the really skilled but, like, unusual mental players, because you don't want to, like, stamp out that aspect of them. There's an aspect of them that's genius, but it is kind of intertwined with the worst flaws of their character as well. So on the one hand, you want them to improve, but you don't want to take away the thing that makes them unique.
Mm-hmm. The thing about... go ahead.
I think... Yeah, so... It's interesting because I feel like the way Fnatic was maybe the best way, the way that Fnatic changed ended up being the best place for him to develop, because they just kind of accepted in the second year, in 2018, that Caps wasn't going to change, right? And so they actually just completely changed the style of playing to facilitate what he was doing instead. So that ended up being like, they didn't try to stamp it out. They tried to and they ended up trying to facilitate it and trying to make their play style, right? About like giving Caps the best chance to succeed at whatever the fuck he's doing. And then that's how it happened. And it's interesting to see like that evolution continue, because I would say that like 2017, Fnatic was playing to bot and they were giving Caps like room to try stuff, and if it didn't go well, like Reckless would be accelerated, Soaz would be playing survive side, and then this is fine, like Reckless will carry the game like this, and that's how they went. 2018, it was like, okay, Caps is just going to do whatever the fuck he's going to do, so let's try to make this work because he's like so good. So we're going to win through bot, and we're going to use our bot pressure to accelerate Caps and win the game like this. And now, like, the next evolution is Caps is just going to win, and he's going to go and he's going to snowball top side, right? And then we're going to play like bot to mid to top, or we're going to play mid to top, or something like this. And I think that seeing that evolution is, or even in some cases like mid to bot and Perks, but Perks is like more often survive side than anyone else. So I think that this evolution of Caps is really interesting to watch, because it indicates that like his time on Fnatic didn't helped him grow into this player and helped like encourage this kind of mentality he had rather than stamping it out. So
I think
what were you gonna say, Loco?
Like Caps reminds me of two Korean players that one I know personally and one I've heard stories about. Like he's very Mad Life and Faker-esque, not in terms of playstyle, but in terms of like, I guess, how much in Korea we call it like how much you're in the pool, like how much you're in the body of water, where Caps is like completely submerged. And then that's how Mad Life was, and that's how I heard Faker was. Like, just
what's the analogy there? I'm confused by where the analogy is coming from. What do you mean they're in the pool?
Like, completely submerged. Like, there's people that like have their toe in, there's people that like have their feet in.
What's the pool meant to represent? Like how much you're into the game, or like, how much you feel the game, or something?
It can be like game, it can be a girl, it can be like school. Like, it's like how much like you're just like.
So he's just an all in. He's just
everything's in there, and then like the things that come with it is like you lack skills in like other areas, like that's really basic. And then when he made the what do you mean, like what do you mean what do I do on a break, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, this is like the kind of response I would get from Mad Life time to time, and this is like the kind of stories I would hear about Faker. And then like that's when I was like, oh, he's like one of those where you're just like submerged and then you lack skills elsewhere, but you're so fucking just like all the way in this. I think that's really unique, especially nowadays where like people have like phones, like you can stay connected to the internet. Like anything you want to do is like at the tip of your fingers, and like this guy's just all in on this.
Kelsey, like since obviously there have been a lot of games for such an absurdly good player, he has also entered the fuck out of a lot of big games. Even at MSI, like I've pointed that out to people, like he was losing half the fucking games for them against SK Telecom. So in this scenario, like in G2 as a team, are they a team that is better at being able to still win even when Caps is inting a bit compared to the Fnatic squad he was on?
I think this is again why either they or the coaching staff probably emphasize mid-game fundamentals so much. It's because it's like even if we fuck up on whatever we're doing in the early game, we can still win through that, right? So I think that's like part of embracing it is still you have to have some kind of buffer. So I think that's probably part of why they're so hyper focused on this element of play, because like that's where you can't make the mistakes the most. I mean, this is what LS always used to say is that the best mid game wins, but I think that there is some truth to that. But obviously, it's more convenient if you can hard snowball early game by taking some risks. But if you focus hard on mid game, then you're probably gonna win, right?
See, Kelsey, I'm afraid I'm going to have to reveal what really happened here, right? Is G2, when they worked with Weldon, paid him for lifetime access to his advanced mid-game practice facility. Like he has like a whole system where you just start off and the game starts at like 10 minutes and you just start practicing there because everyone knows like don't bother practicing the first part and the last part. And I believe there was once like an interesting discussion room with that where they definitely conclusively proved that that is the way to play the game. I mean, by the end, even the moderator was on the other guy's side. So what can I tell you, right? That one seemed fair to me. Seemed like a perfectly reasonable discussion. No, but anyway.
I mean, IG won Worlds. I'm just throwing that out there. And their mid game is fucking atrocious. So.
Indeed, they did. Exactly. So take that one.
IG is like, if you're good enough, then you're good enough. If you're not good enough, then it is what it is.
What I love is though, like I can even see by what Kelsey's saying that I think there's even a logic to that. Like if I'm the coaching staff, that would even be the ultimate way to deal with someone like Caps is tell him sort of like instead of complaining about the times he just literally like gives away a kill at like level 3 or something ridiculous. And you think, if you're like a normal coach, you're like, why is he doing that? Like, you're the best player in the fucking world. Like, why are you going for that play? Like, it's not like we win the game if you make the play. But the sad thing is, it would be a way better strategy, as opposed to just berating him like that, like a fucking naughty dog that's sort of shit on the floor every time. It would just be cleverer to just constantly stress to your team. But in the mid game, work together, group, like make sure you cover each other. Like, that would be the way to offset some of those flaws. Because I have to say, like, they're just never going to get out of this guy at this point in time. He has never seen a dodgy all-in at fucking level 1 to 3 that he didn't like. It's unreal. He reminds me of I'll give you a random piece of personal info here, because it's not really that. It's nothing they can use against me in an internment camp, in an interrogation session in 10 years in a post-apocalyptic future. So I can give this one away, right? But I have a really bad problem, and always have had since I was a kid, with eating ice cream.
What?
Are you ready, Loco?
Okay.
It's because since I have a massive brain, well, like the nerve nerves that go to your brain and they're the top of your mouth, aren't they? So the problem is, if you eat ice cream and you're one of those people who eats on the side or something, you're all right. But I have the problem where I always put the ice cream on the top of my mouth and it instantly gives me a brain freeze, right? And the problem is this. Because ice cream is delicious, the brain freeze, if you know, isn't instant, right? It's sort of charged up and then suddenly it hits you. But the problem is when it hits you, it's just stopping eating doesn't instantly stop the brain freeze. It takes a few seconds to cool down again, And so the problem I would always have is when I would get the brain freeze, obviously I'd be like, oh, fuck, that's killing me. But then first of all, even if I was eating the ice cream, sometimes I would just keep eating it, but just slower, as though eating slow would help, like just a little bit. And then the worst problem I would have is this, Loco. Once the brain freeze stopped, and I'd be like, the relief. My brain would go, tell you what would be great with that relief, some delicious ice cream. And I'd go, yeah. And then I'd, no, wait, I just remembered what giving the breath. No, that's like what Caps is like, mate. Even if he doesn't go for that all in at level 1, he's going to see another one 2 minutes. What about this one over here? It's like you can't stop someone like that. They're just going to do it, mate. You may as well just you either may as well kick him out the team or just embrace it and make that your fucking play.
Oh man, when you said that, a moment came to my head. It's the Fnatic versus G2 game where he gets solo killed, like level 2, the Renekton versus Akali matchup.
Yes, when he was in top lane. Yeah.
And I think he's like 0-2 or 0-3.
It was so unnecessary for what he did in that scenario as well.
He's like 0-2 or 0-3, and then he goes mid lane, and then he kills the TF. And then, I think the TF was like 1-0, but it was a situation where Akali is just like almost out of the game status, and then this guy is like still looking for all lens, and then he actually pulls it off. Like he's always fucking looking.
And that's the thing people don't realize, Loco. It's easy to go, see, he's a genius. One player counters the other one. No, what you haven't stopped and thought about, guys, is what if he fucked up that other play in the mid? That would be like where if you're the team, you like pause the game. He's intentionally feeding the whole game. He's got 2 lane opponents ahead in the beginning of one game. Like that's like some shit where you get banned from solo queue if you keep doing that, Loco. He's doing it in a pro game.
Yeah,
but God bless him, it did work. It looked amazing. I can't lie.
There's people with Caps' mindset, and there's people with
the skills. That's the problem.
There's people with Caps' mindset, and there's people with Caps' skill set. There's very, very few people with both together.
I think so. It's really interesting because I would say that, like for me, I was really hypercritical of UZI, for example, for a really long part of his career because he's very similar, I think, in mindset. Yes. And when I've had a chance to talk to him after criticizing him all this time, it's like he's very aware that these are going to be the criticisms people make of him. So you ask him what he thinks his weaknesses are, and he'll just like. He'll list it off as if this is something that he's been told his entire career and doesn't really care, right? He's just like, this is whatever. So I think that this kind of mindset is just continuing to ignore this type of criticism. It's like, no, if I can pull this off, I'm going to be fucking sick, right? So I think that it's a really arrogant mindset, but you have to be somewhat arrogant to be the best. Yes. And if you can get your own advantages like this, then that's how it goes. And obviously it's both like, so I imagine being on G2, the level of enthusiasm from all the players is just really not easy to coach, but just really enjoyable to coach, if I would put it this way, because it's like they're probably the ones bringing a lot of the ideas to the table. A lot of it's like Caps always wants to play whatever the new champion is mid, even if it's not a mid lane champion, right? And he wants to try it, and he puts enough games in to test it in scrims, and he knows what matchups he wants to play it into, and all this other shit. But so I imagine G2 is kind of like a team full of players like this. So
I can imagine if you're their coach, the dream has to be like, you say, well, I guess we could maybe play this, and then someone just goes, I'll play that even though it's a losing matchup. Like, what fucking world is this? Like, it's just my dream or something.
Let's go to a different team. We've been on G2 for so long. One team that's like directly contrasting to G2, and like people always compare it to an A team, like Splice. I mean, Kelsey, what's your opinion on Splice? Like, what's your rundown? And on the question people ask all the fucking time, like, how do you think Splice would do in an A? I know you don't watch LCS. Like, in terms of playstyle transitioning over, how do you think they'll do in terms of general skill level?
I do think that it's really weird to watch a Splice game because even plays that are advantageous for them, they don't take because it's like they're waiting for some specific item spike or something like this before they can get online. Like watching them play the game that they won against Fnatic was just so weird to me because they would be at Baron first and starting Baron, but they wouldn't want to actually commit to any kind of fight at all, right? That they would just be waiting, or they gave up both like Baron and Dragon when I felt like they could have taken fights at advantage, but they were just like standing there across from a high poke team from Fnatic and getting poked down to the point where they could no longer take the fight. But then they get 3 items on Kabe and it's suddenly like, oh, okay, we can fight now. It's really fucking strange. I don't really know what to say about Splice other than, I mean, I guess if that's their mentality, they probably do well in NA, because I feel like most NA games, just looking at average game times, last long enough for Kabe to get 3 items. So, yeah.
I feel like
I have a problem with this team. Oh, go on.
I feel my understanding on Splice is they're a very systematic team, but their mid game is garbage. For some reason, they just can't learn mid game, or their system just does not like work in mid game. Like whenever I watch them play early game, and whenever I watch them like try to play out their game plan, it's actually very like easy to tell what they're gonna do. In the game where they had Azir Trist, they are always just consistently playing around Trist lane. Trist bottom, okay, we take the turret, let's swap over. We take top turret, let's do Herald, and then we're gonna go mid turret. Always play around Trist. Don't do anything if you're not around Trist. Jungler, make sure you're here. If you're not around the Trist lane, like don't do anything. And then after they get the first 3 turrets, all that system goes away. Like they're just doing random shit. They're not setting up for things properly. So I'd imagine their early game is very, very well thought out, and like they go over it all the time, and they practice it, and they have good team fighting because they just keep getting into those situations, and they're constantly drafting comps that work in team fight anyways, and it's probably naturally suited for most of their players, especially Humanoid and Kabe. So that's my understanding on it.
I think that they probably have systems in place for early game, mid game, and late game, but I don't think their systems are good. That's my feeling on it. I think that they're pretty good at playing survive side, and I don't know if it's just they're pretty good at like mitigating. You can argue that the early game is good in the sense that they don't bleed too much, and they should bleed a lot with a lot of the drafts they attempt, right? They should bleed way more, but they don't. So you can argue that from that perspective, their early game is pretty good. But if that's the mentality that Splice go into, then it's kind of hard to argue that their early game is just objectively good, right? It's that it's the ideal early game.
It's good for the team they have, and I think like every team is going to come with different limitations, and every player is going to have different limitation, and this is the system they figured out that's going to give them the best results.
You think that this team doesn't have enough talent to learn how to lane, or what? Like,
I have no idea. I don't coach this team. I don't know these players individually
but that's how
very
it
well.
looks to me, is that they just don't know. Some of their players just don't know laning fundamentals. Like their bot lane is really weird to watch. For example, I think part of like people say Kabe has like such a wide champion pool, but I think that's just part of that he doesn't look for trades, or he doesn't learn these specific laning fundamentals that well, so he can play any champion because he just plays the lane the same way. So yeah, it's just weird to me to think of this team as a team that is good, has good early game, because I feel like they're missing a lot of things that would make their early game really, that you would normally judge an early game on. But at the same time, like what they do is interesting and effective for their early game, but it's like, can your players not learn these things? Like what's missing? I don't know. It's weird.
I think for Vizitachi, like the early game thing has been pretty same, but for Kabe and for bot lane, I think their early game has gotten better, and they are playing aggressive. In the Fnatic game, like if Fnatic is just playing like Fnatic bot lane and Splice is playing like Splice bot lane, it should be just pretty even, no kills. But Splice bot side is actually playing aggressive, actually pressuring when Hylissang's roaming, and it's stuff I didn't see out of them, and it's something Duke talked about last time we had it on, like pushing their bot lane to be more aggressive and to lane better, and I think we did see that in the Fnatic game.
I don't agree that we saw it in the Fnatic Splice game, because I feel like they should have gotten way more out of the early game, and the only reason why, so they ended up getting something out of diving Reckless, and they couldn't. First of all, they couldn't prevent Hillsong from roaming. That roam went really badly because he dove a Kiana, and I don't know how much practice they had diving Kianas, but it was really badly executed. And then Reckless didn't really get punished under tower versus like Zaya and Nautilus, which I think is really ridiculous. And the fact that
he's Ezreal, he's just staying far behind.
No. The fact that Rakan even had priority to roam, like I haven't watched the pro view of the game. It just feels like so strange.
It wasn't it was just they're willing to just let him roam because it's Rakan and like Hillsong's taking cuts.
So they're willing to not play the lane properly to let him roam, or what? Like
you can always ditch the lane because you have Ezreal and just what does it take the hits on turret?
I don't. But it wasn't even that they ditched the lane. Like the wave was in Fnatic's favor. This is what I'm talking about, is that they didn't play that lane well. And the only reason why they got the kill on Ezreal was because, I don't know, Broxah decided that on reset he wasn't going to go bot, which is a very obvious place to go to secure the Sheen back for Ezreal, and he decided he was going to go top and counter jungle red buff instead of trying to like reclaim bot vision and set up for Infernal when you have a fucking priority mid over, you have like range versus melee mid champion.
I'll tell you the problem I have with this team. I'll give you my little rant.
Okay.
So first of all, the eye test is fucking garbage for Splice and always has been with this core. The only player I think the eye test makes look good isn't fucking Kobe, because if anyone knows my actual complaints about Reckless, Kobe just is fucking Reckless from about 4 years ago. So there's one reason I don't give a flying fuck. He's not the starter. Like the only player who ever looks legit sick on that team is Humanoid. And even then, as Kelsey alluded to, it's basically his fucking meta right now. It's all the champions he plays anyway, not just because they're in meta now. They just are his champions. So I think the problem with him is I can't even give him full credit because I'm really sort of using some counterfactual of like, but I think if he was on Fnatic, he'd be a fucking monster. But it's like he isn't. And he isn't on that team. He doesn't have that system. So I'm just guessing that he'd be a better player than he is, even though I think he's a very good mid at the moment anyway. So then the problem is the eye test is garbage for the rest of the team. As you say, they don't ever look like they make plays, even when they're like almost screaming out to them on the screen. They do seem as though lose, whether they're ahead or behind, they're just like, haha, let's wait for this particular item spike. That is when we will win the game. And then that should mean I diss them though and say they're not a good team. But the problem is, all the factors that go in their favor basically are sort of like, I'm sort of giving them credit for not being as bad as I would think they would be. So, for example,
that's the
they're
thing,
a really
though.
hard fucking team to put away. They're a hard team to put away, even if you're up on them. Like, it's fucking hard. And that's not just, by the way, picking scale. Like, again, people are like, just pick scaling comps and they must team fight a lot. It's like, that isn't enough. Like, this teams pick better scaling comps and they still beat them. So if you don't pick a scaling comp, then you have to stop before a certain point in time.
Splice is
hard to beat this team.
So Splice was
really,
a team
like,
I hated watching in spring, and it was like along with like Splice, Rogue, Excel, those were like the 3 European teams like I refused to watch. Like I had no respect for Excel and Rogue, but me watching Splice had more to do with like, god damn, they were boring to watch, less than like I don't have respect for this team. Like being a former coach, like you're not always given like pieces like you want. Like you're given pieces and you're asked to bring the best result possible with it. Is Splice style boring? Or it is boring. They're improving a bit. They're being more aggressive. They're trying to be more proactive early game, but I respect them the fuck out of like, you were given these pieces and you were asked to get results, and he found the best way to get results, and he is getting results with it. I think very few coaches would have came to the conclusion and would have came to this solution of like getting this team to play this way and getting these results. So I actually have a lot of respect for what they're able to do with like the pieces they have.
It's like I mean it's really weird because I don't know if I can give Splice credit for a good early game if Hillsong is literally like they literally have full river control. Hillsong, like Fnatic, literally has full river control, and he's getting a roam off, and he's just entering the dive. Like, do I give Splice credit for having a good early game then, when Fnatic are the ones who have full river control and are actually setting up the play? I don't know. Like, it's really hard to do. So,
Loco, have you noticed yet the trend of when you have you know? I shouldn't. You know what, Loco? I feel like you're like my fucking new. Like I've just met a woman, right? and I've got a new relationship with
God.
her, and she's got a kid from a past relationship, and so I'm taking you along, Loco. You're my kid. I'm taking you along to play dates. And the problem is, I'm taking you along, and I'm introducing you to all these brilliant, gifted minds that I used to know. I have like fucking LS. I've got Veteran. I've got Kelsey. I bring them in, and I tell them, listen, Loco, these kids are. I know you're good. Like I stuck your printing on the fridge and that, but these kids are in that fucking like advanced learning program. Don't try and mix it up with them, like, you know. And then you're just going straight in, trying to compare, like you're trying to argue with people who have like photographic memories, like the lane state of a game you watched like on a second monitor while fucking messaging your friend what club in K-Town you're going to that night. And then you're wondering, I think I'll just keep returning over and over again to that specific game state that I only have.
I'd be more than happy to like go over like the actual game states with it, because I think I'm 100%
No, I'm just saying in this case, Loco, like it doesn't go anywhere. They're going to be dead ends. Like if you want to make your points, just draw them back to a more abstract point and make the general point. Like if you keep hammering that specific one, you can tell she already pulled up the VOD. Like as we were speaking there.
I mean, I didn't actually, but I have Fnatic Vitality up right now. But I think. It's I don't know. I do have respect for Splice, because I do think some.
Thank God. I thought you were going to say Locodoco for a second there. Like, no, you understand he's just here for the show. Like, yeah, keep going. Splice.
No,
Why did you?
Because I think some of the way they set up for late game fights is good. Like it's conservative, and they have good game plans overall with the way that they draft. So I think that they're not dumb. It's really interesting to me how they play and manage to succeed in a region where I feel like early game planning is just generally, and mid game planning is just generally more advanced than what they bring to the table.
Let's face it, if you were to add up all the strengths of the teams in Europe, like first of all, it should be the wrong region to have this style and get success in. And then secondly, there's no way you should be beating Fnatic. They had like the best early game of seemingly any team in the world.
I think, Fnatic's early game has a lot of holes in it, and I wouldn't say it's the best early game, but I think that they're really practiced at kind of the way of playing early game that they bring to the table, and it has roots all the way back to like even 2015 Fnatic, because you had Febiven playing like Jace, Zir, stuff that just like pushes, and even I guess LeBlanc said to an extent too, where he just wants to play for lane and push for lane, and then you have the iteration of Caps, who is also doing something similar, and then obviously it's evolved to an extent, and I'm making it seem really one-dimensional, but like securing and playing for mid is actually kind of hard to execute because it's a shorter lane, right? And you have to have like good reset timings on your sides to make sure you can maintain vision around mid and then set up for plays around mid. So what they do is kind of one-dimensional to an extent. I also think that right now Fnatic have kind of a jungle problem, and that keeps me from saying that they have the best early game.
Okay.
It almost just seems like Broxah is
Let's just put a pin in that 1 second. We'll come back to Fnatic next, right? I'll definitely remember this. But one thing to say on the Splice angle, since we were trying to speculate, how much of it is coaching staff, how much is the players, when do you give them credit for doing something right, even though it seemingly then means, like, for example, how good can your early game be if you never fucking capitalize on it and win the game? Like, you can't be that great, can it? So I would say this is pure speculation. I'm going off sort of like lateral thinking here, but one problem I have is this, Kelsey. This is what killed my hope that this was just a team that's going to develop and learn these things. To me, it really looks like the good things in the team are mainly things coaching staff set up, and that they're working around limitations of players. Because a couple of weeks ago, I had Cersei and Kobe on my show I do with Veteran, the Elitists United one. And on this show, Cersei, and this wasn't meant to be a joke, by the way, he genuinely attempted this. He attempted to do one of my favorite classic bullshit, like, how do you describe this? Like a false comparison, basically. So the classic example of this, Kelsey, you'll know this one, is back in the day, people would say, the reason Monty's so biased is because if a Korean team played a bloody clown fiesta game like that, he'd explain why it wasn't so bad, or, the team that took the initiative and got the kills, like was a genius playmaking or something. But then their logic was that if you'd have took the nameplates off and he didn't know and he thought it could be like an LCS game, for example, he'd have flamed them like, no, they're all just, it's just garbage the way they're playing. So basically, Cersei tried to do the equivalent, and this is what will kill you, right? Because if you're thinking to yourself, they're just a team that they know they've got these flaws, they're working on them, they're trying to... No. Cersei actually said to me in Veteran, he goes, how come when everyone's talking about that Origin team, they're always talking about how genius they are with their setups and they're like risk averse, and they know what situations to take. But when and I just stopped them there and I was basically just like, if you're about to say that is what you think Splice is doing now in these mid games and that you want credit for that, like we're giving credit to Origin, who at least have fucking intelligent players that if they were doing something like that might have a reason behind it. Like, we're not giving you any of that credit at all. That is a terrible comparison. But unfortunately, the fact that he'd even go for that suggests they think they're playing correctly, Kelsey.
Yeah, it's really strange to me. It's also because they have a really bad habit of giving up like bot side objectives or not even caring if their sideline matchups scale well, just because I think they fundamentally don't know how to contest objective vision without grouping as 5. And that's probably where the big NA comparison comes from, right? Is meme name ramming 5 mid, hilarious. But I think that that's probably where it comes from, because I see like them giving up bot turrets or not even trying to sideline versus this. This like maybe this is unfair because I have seen games where they'll play Vayne specifically to match like the top laner, like the hyperscaling top laner and side laner. So sometimes they'll do stuff like that, but by and large, unless their group is 5, they don't know how to contest Baron vision. They don't know how to contest topside vision, so they'll be more likely to lose like their bot inhib first than most teams in LEC. So this kind of thing is really weird to me. So it's even then it's hard for me to say that their late game is super good. It's just I think it's
their team fighting is really good.
It's easy to lose late game to a team that does something like that if you're not looking out for it, right? But it's yeah, and I agree. Their team fighting is really good, but also if you're picking like 3 hyperscaling team fighters in every lane, then of course your team fighting is going to be good.
At the cost of your early game being bad. I mean, that's kind of their
as well.
I mean, that's kind of their give and take. Like, if you're picking 3 hyper carries, then your early game's going to be bad because your team fighting is going to be good because your late game's going to be good.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, but this is even then. It's like, okay, this is my issue with Splice is that I want to praise them, but almost every aspect that I praise has a caveat, and that's what keeps me from saying Splice is like a top worlds contender.
I'm very curious. Like, I mean, we can't find out, and also because we have like the answer of like this is the best way to play for Splice. Maybe there is a better way. I'm very curious what other coaches or other management would have ended up with if they had this roster. Like, what this Splice team would look like. Because from talking to Duke, it seemed very specific on like what he thought about the player and what he thought why they do it. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, we do it because we do it.
This is where maybe Kelsey will disagree, because when she said earlier, like, what do you think, these players aren't good enough, they can't learn these things? Like, I don't know if she was going to go a different angle on that, but I kind of disagree. I personally, the reason why I actually give the coaches credit for this team is I think they've got the materials to be what probably should be like the 6th best team in LEC, but actually at the moment they're knocking on the door being like the 3rd best team. So I think that's pretty legit, actually. I as much as I agree, I think they don't look good.
So, like, I guess here's where I sort of disagree with that, because I feel like, okay, so people will knock Xerxes really hard because his style of jungling is strange, but I think Xerxes learned to jungle in fucking Unicorns of Love, where his mid laner was Exile, and Exile is always just going to lose mid, so what do you do in that scenario? You fucking hyper clear.
No, he was just a big Claylov fan from back in the day. He knows the secret. You come out of that jungle as a 6th carry.
You hyper clear, you get level 6 first, and you force a fight.
Yes.
That's so. But obviously, that style's like dog shit right now. But Xerxes will still
does it though.
Like, he'll still do it, even if arguably his mid laner is better, just because.
You would think he could make so many players with that mid lane if he wanted to.
Like, I think mechanically, if that's your style of jungling, you're probably not bad, right? You can probably win some like.
Seems
2v2.
like a good jungler in isolation.
Yeah,
just
you
not
can
for his
probably.
team necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably win 2v2s around mid earlier, right? If you have enough faith in your ability to just like farm to 6 and then win team fights off of that, right? You probably can win some 2v2s earlier if you just like practice them or work on them. So that's why I feel like Xerxes could actually be a really good player. And then I think Humanoid is really gifted individually. I think that obviously he played like Azir and Kiana recently. So one of these champions are pretty broken, and obviously he has I don't know how many fucking games on his year in his time playing League of Legends, but it's like I do think he's a gifted individual player. There's nothing that he's done so far that indicates to me that he's not. Like even when I was watching him play in EU Masters, I thought he was pretty good. And then
I mean, remember, he even had a pretty bad team when he used to play like that as well.
Maybe the argument is that, like, I look at this, Vizichachi is maybe the one where I had the most question marks, but allegedly his leadership skills are really good.
Yeah, but Kelsey, isn't that where we have to start immediately? Because here's the problem. Vizichachi does not have to play the way he chooses to play in Season 9. Like, he plays now as though this is the only options. Like, mate, they've been carries all year long. Like, where is this guy?
Well, Kelsey, more of the question is, let's say with the roster they have, if there's an average coach with average knowledge, average conflict resolution, like average everything, do you think the placement they have is indicative of the roster they have or indicative of the coaching they have?
I mean, I think that if it's like, I think these players are all really individually good. So maybe you can argue that it's going to take a lot of investment to get them to a point where, because it's almost like they came from a place where they weren't taught specific things or they didn't have to learn specific styles of play, but they got around them by being individually skilled in some way. Because a lot of these players
were all basically on bad teams, yeah, sure.
Like a lot of these players came from like dog shit teams.
So in your opinion, I guess it's like a straight yes or no. Like with the average coach, like average analytic, like average everything. Where do you think they would? Do you think they should be where they are?
I looked at this roster and I thought it was easily the top 5 roster. Let me see. I'm gonna bring up the standings again.
Oh no, but here's the problem, Kelsey. I know what you mean.
I had them above Misfits and Shaka, I think, when the roster is announced.
Like, here's the problem, though. This is the problem, Kelsey, is if the roster alone doesn't make a good team. I mean, Misfits has proven that.
I agree.
Like, on paper, that still looks like a good roster. It's just together, it turned out they were terrible.
Yeah. I thought
so. I have the same problem.
Misfits, but...
Yeah, but that's the problem I have with Splice. Is like, I think in isolation, I'd agree with you. I think they're all good players. Like, for example, I think people just actually didn't know Norscarum was a good player. That's why he wasn't in LEC briefly. But I don't know if they're the right players on these teams. Like, if I'm going to have a super late scaling team that waits to the end of the game, I wouldn't have Humanoid on that team. I'd have him on a team that was super fucking aggro.
I think
if I'm going to have Moscow, I wouldn't put him with Kobe as his laner. Like, I'd put him with some fucking super sick laner.
But I think at the same time, I think that these players are starting from a point where they probably can learn stuff. Like, a lot of them are really young, right? So I think that's where I was, and I actually had them reasonably highly placed, so I feel like they haven't really over or underperformed to my expectations, so they're pretty good. Like, I rated all these players pretty highly in my head when they came together, and I thought that, okay, maybe they can play well. Like, and Zeus and Kabe had played together before, and that's the thing, is that this, with 3 different members, this team played more or less the same last year.
Sure.
So,
right. Are you tying that angle in? Like, so to you, that suggests that coaching staff has more of an impact on their style now, not just the limitations of the players.
Yeah, I mean that, and also it feels like, okay, maybe Xerxes and Kabe haven't advanced in a year and a half, so that's kind of weird, right? As individual players, because they're still playing the same way, so that's kind of weird. I don't like. So, and to go back to Loco's question, is do you think average coach would have made this team better or worse? I think probably average coach would probably make this team
exactly the same.
About the same. So that doesn't indicate to me that the coaching staff is like super good or super bad. You know, it's just it's probably pretty decent. You know.
Right. Anyway, let's go to the Fnatic topic. So anyway, what you were talking about there is because I made the point that Fnatic has one of the best early games in the whole world. Right. You were going to go into some sort of point as to like how Broxah's play impacts that and potentially has flaws in it, or presumably is why maybe it looked like a bit of fool's gold. Like, it looked amazing, but maybe it wasn't as sick as it initially seemed.
Broxah?
Yeah. Didn't you have a point about Broxah with Fnatic's early game?
Yeah, I think I don't like, a lot of people rate Broxah really highly, mostly because of Worlds, and I think mostly because of the mechanical plays he was able to make.
Sure.
I even rated him really highly in Worlds.
Yeah, he looked sick.
So I'm not even.
Right up until Ning absolutely read his entire soul, it looked pretty good.
A lot of the way that you played, a lot of the way that jungle was played is this is like level 2 ganks, and level 2 jungle was like the thing. especially because of Scuttlecrap. So that was pretty. And you could play Lee Sin, and he's really, really well known for his Lee Sin. So, and then Xin Zhao was like the other big one. So, yeah, you can make a lot of sick plays on Xin Zhao, but it's not super mechanically intensive champ. So, I think that this is like where he got a lot of his praise. And I mean, I think again, Worlds was when I made like videos about how, like, I initially predicted Fnatic to win Worlds, but then when I was doing my video because I was doing a video a day, when I was doing my video for the series, I was watching how Ning was playing, and like this is where my respect for Ning came from, and why I still have respect for Ning. And I was like, okay, well, better jungler wins, and that was literally the title of my video because I thought that the way Broxah plays is just really one-dimensional, really weird. And then I still think that that's the case, where he'll either full clear and gank one lane, or he's still playing for enemy camps. It's like a similar problem with Maxlor, right? I have a similar problem with Broxah to Maxlor.
They still play the old meta.
Yeah, they're playing like either the old meta or they're just playing like one way and not they're also not like considering objectives as much in their
bearing in mind, obviously I'm not someone who's playing like solo queue a lot, and definitely not in a mind of how it would affect competitive. When they play solo queue, are they able to use the old style and still be effective? Like, surely you would think they would figure out from that, like, this doesn't really work.
What do you mean the old style and be very effective?
I mean, like you said, he just tries to take the enemy's camps as though like it's not 3 years ago or whatever. Like that doesn't do anything right now, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, it's not just that, right? Because I thought that Broxah was overrated last year before Worlds, and then the year before.
People who don't know, basically, this is an area where Kelsey and Veteran actually are quite aligned in terms of thinking, which is basically, even when Fnatic was the number one team, the reason they thought Broxah was a bit overrated is he basically just had all winning lanes, and even then would just sit and farm up. And like half the time he wouldn't go, even when the meta was that he could go and steal the camps and invade and attack the enemy jungler. He wouldn't do it a lot, actually. He would just kind of sit back and would almost just be, not literally carried, but he'd be sort of swept along with just the lanes going really well, you know.
It almost looks like when I'm watching these games, the way that some of Fnatic's lanes get attacked is that he's not even planning out his routes from spawn. Because like the game that we mentioned with Splice, where I said that I felt like Broxah should have gone bottom, it looked like Reckless was placed such that he was expecting Broxah to come bottom after reset for counter gank. But he didn't. He went top and he tried to counter jungle red buff when Infernal was in play and Reckless died. So it's like stuff like this is really confusing to me in terms of how Broxah is playing, and I think a lot of Fnatic laners, when they see like players dying or getting ganked randomly or not resetting at the right times, they might think that, oh, okay, this is the laner's fault. But sometimes it feels like it's hard to tell the difference, right? But there are a lot of instances where it feels like Broxah should be doing something else and he's not. So,
right, Loco, you're a fan of overrated junglers. What do you think of Broxah?
I think Broxah's the best performing jungler in the EU so far.
Okay, why? Why?
From his performance, like from him actually being able to counter gank, from him actually being able to read under jungler. I think. Kelsey, how do you think Fnatic's been so far? I would say
Fnatic's fine.
I don't think they've been fine. I think they've been.
Loco, 1 second, is it? Like, mate, was that actually a rhetorical question you asked there where you said, how do you think Fnatic's done there? Because we didn't get that. Like, I really thought you were asking her to answer there. So, like, it was good. Just be careful when you do that. Like, if you want her to answer, she'll answer. If you want to give your thoughts, just give your thoughts first. Then she can answer afterwards, right?
I'm surprised.
You probably have something to say.
No, I'm surprised she said fine, because I think, like, 7-1 record is not fine. It's, like, doing really well.
Depends what your team is, though, doesn't it? What's the expectation? Well, they were going to go 0-6, were they?
What did you think? What was your expectation for Fnatic?
I thought that they would win LEC in spring.
Ooh, there we go.
I thought that they were going to place number 1.
Okay. See?
So, why did you think they were going to place number 1? Where did you get their strength from?
Because I think that their system is really... I think literally the reason why I said this was because that Fnatic system is so kind of ingrained that even when Caps was fucking ending for his life at Worlds, they still managed to make the semifinals.
Yes. Yeah.
Or they still managed, the grand final. So that was like literally my reasoning as to why, like, if you replace Caps, Fnatic will still be good. And
Not
and
not
it was,
good. The
I thought
best
it was
in
like
EU.
either I
The
thought it was
best
either
in
going to
EU,
be
right?
Fnatic or G2. So I was thinking, okay, who's going to place first in spring? Maybe Perks will take more time to be a good ball laner.
Understandable.
So Fnatic's probably going to place first. Was literally my reasoning. I thought it would either be Fnatic or G2.
And then you think their strength comes from what is their system?
So their system is very, very based on getting controlled through bottom to row mid and get place wards around mid. Make sure you have perfect mid control so that you can be first to objectives. A lot of this for me comes from their level 1 planning, and also when Hillsong is on very specific playmaking champions. Very specific playmaking champions. I think Hillsong's champion pool is kind of small, but like they managed to make this work, and this is their system. I also think Young Buck is a pretty good coach, and his approach to a lot of things are smart, and he's like developed a lot over the years. So for me, I thought that he would be the best coach to kind of like adapt to having this new mid laner and having Nemesis instead of Caps. I think for me, maybe one of the bigger question marks was Bippo over Soaz. I think that has kind of showed its head more because Bippo was playing really well at Worlds, but he was just basically playing like, I'm going blue side, I'm gonna clear the wave, I'm not gonna get dove, I'm gonna play these champions that are really hard to dive on blue side. And he had to kind of change his role a lot in this iteration of Fnatic. So I think that's kind of part of it, but I don't know. It's really strange because I think like
I'm very curious. I'm curious
like,
what you think about rest of the roster. Like, let's say 1 is the best player in the region, 10 is the worst player in the region. Let's go through like really quickly. Where would you put Bippo?
He feels kind of average among EU tops. So if I had to put a number, like average is like around a 5, right?
Yeah, average is just 5. So he's a 5.
Yeah. So
what's
Nemesis?
Nemesis?
He's like around a 5. Nemesis. There are a lot of really good EU mids, so I think maybe he's lower.
What number?
Did you say 1 or 10 is the best?
1 is best, 10 is the worst.
Right, so I'm guessing she's going to say like 6 or 7 then, right?
Yeah, that's about right.
6 or 7.
Well, the most stacked position.
Let's
I
go.
mean, I'm not like I'm not listing them from 1 to bottom. It's just like I might have like multiple mid
Yeah,
laners.
but just give me a good benchmark. Just give me a benchmark.
Okay.
So like a 6?
Yeah, 6.
What would you give Reckless?
I think. Let me see. Just look at the 80s. I think it's fair to say he's top 3. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Upset, Perked, Reckless, sure 3. And then where would you put
That's
Hillsong?
not my 3, but
Okay.
Yeah, I think she'd have
All right, sure, yeah.
yeah, it would.
Okay, so Reckless 3. What about Hillsong?
Hillsong, it really depends on the champion, but he usually gets the champions he wants, so...
It's funny, isn't it, though, how that's basically been his MO his entire career. Like, yeah, back in the day, if he had Thresh, he looked fucking amazing. He would dog shit Vardags in his lane.
But it's really funny because Reckless gets shit on so much for champion pools, but I feel like it was...
No, mate, this is the point I was going to make. Yes, if you give him Pike, we all know he will go fucking balls deep and make all the great play. But I tell you what, he fucking falls off like a motherfucker when he gets past those first couple of champions. Like, he just becomes an okay player.
Yeah, so I think that's... But since he almost always gets those champs, and...
Nice life, isn't it?
probably like around 3-2. So,
there you go.
Yeah, like their
Two
bottom is
are
around
like
3 is...
3 or 2, right?
Average.
And what we give him Broxah just to complete the...
So,
example.
let's not do Broxah. Can you do the...
Eagle's better, Cold is better, Self-Made is better, Cersei is better, actually.
5, 6 maybe.
6 or 7, maybe.
So,
So basically, she's given the bot side's pretty strong, one of the best in EU. Top's the average. Jungle's not that good. Mid's all right.
This is
so actually,
context of EU, right?
yeah.
And by the way, Loco, I tell you what, if you go and look in the spring when they were stomping everyone, they just played through fucking bot, didn't they?
Then I don't get how, what is it, Kelsey, like, Fnatic's like doing really well right now. They're 7-1, and if their player rankings, like on average, like everything combined, like with Kelsey's rating, they'd be somewhere around like 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
Where's the jump coming from, in your opinion?
Yeah, why have they got such a good
I
record?
said their
basically?
system's really good. Like, I do
you
think
go.
their system
Coaching.
is really well practiced. Like, their system is really well practiced, and there's like I think two of the best junglers in the league are on bottom teams. So, I mean, I don't think that player skill level is going to indicate like
Definitely not
how
all
good
the
your team
time.
is.
But I don't think like, I mean, their system must be fucking insane if they can take like an average like a 5 across the board.
Like there's
To
some
be fair,
teams
Loco,
that
they did start the league losing every motherfucking game. So if I did the counterfactual to you and said why are they losing every game with all such sick players, Loco?
Why, if we're talking about spring, then we can talk about it differently. But for summer, right, they didn't start by losing everything.
Yeah, but
For
I
summer?
don't think that that's player skill level. Like their player skill level didn't suddenly massively jump, right? And I'm not saying like I said, there are probably multiple mids that I would rate a 6. 6 doesn't, because I would say that maybe there's like a big drop off after Taps Nuke Duck maybe or something like this. So I like maybe by that scale, because I'm not necessarily thinking in my head, I'm just like thinking, okay, if you have a weighted average, let's say on a mid lane scale, like this is how I'm rating it. So I'm just because I give these players like these numbers doesn't mean I think they're dog shit anyway. Like I think there's a lot of competition in terms of EU player skill. So like I'm not saying these players are dog shit either, but I do think that this team is like their system is what makes them really strong and not necessarily the individual players. That's a mark of either really good coaching staff or just like players that get along very well. Right? So I think that this, like, and they started out playing pretty poorly, and that's because they hadn't really re-cemented their system with the players that they had, or they hadn't figured out some aspects of their system that needed to be adapted for the new meta. But now that they have, and it's like pretty well in place, they're gonna continue like their trajectory of being strong. And there are some teams that have really one-dimensional systems and that are really easy to see through, but still hard to beat. Like last year, whenever we would play against Fnatic, we would know exactly how they were going to play out the game, and we would try to set up points to counter it or pick champions to counter it. But they were just so good at playing out the system that it was really hard, right? So that's kind of how I view Fnatic.
Okay. Well, I mean, that must be I don't know, like that doesn't make sense to me, because if you give the players like a weighted 5 across the board and they can have first place score with it, maybe they don't end this way, like, but up until like the results so far, like that speaks so well of their system. And I think like people would like bend over backward to be able to get that kind of results if they really truly had like middle of the board roster. And
the problem with that, Loco, is like even though I know you sort of understood what she meant there, but you missed part of it. The part that as far as I can tell you missed is that at the end she did say I wasn't really ranking them on like literal players.
Yeah,
so
where she mediated and there was a lot of success.
So the
I
problem
understood
is
that part.
when you say it like that, Loco, when you say, well, if they have a weighted 5 rating, it's like you're making it sound like everyone else who they're beating has the 4th and the 3rd and the 2nd and no, the point is like in her mind maybe there's like 5 mid laners that are all equal to Nemesis, and therefore it's actually quite logical that you could have the best team if the other teams competing against you, some of them have one of those mid laners. Like for example, Origin. They're only slightly better, aren't they? They're not massively outrageously better.
This is where I differ. I don't think across the board they're 5. I think Broxah is 1 or 2, at the lowest a 3. So that's why
I still am asking you why you think Broxah is good, and you say his performance. What does that mean? Like
his ability to predict where enemy jungler is gonna gank, and the way Fnatic plays. Also, I do agree. Like they do have a good system. I don't think their system shit. I think they're one of the better coached teams, but they're a team where Broxah. Go ahead.
I'll let you finish. I didn't realize you weren't done.
Okay, so they're a team where it's obvious when Blip was pushing up and obvious due to certain pathings that they're going to gank top. And Broxah's there for it. And they're a team with extremely good mid and jungle mid and jungle and top and jungle synergy when they play with Broxah, and their bot and jungle synergy is bad, but because they constantly play towards that and their mid and top side plays up, the synergy between them allows Broxah to have good pathing and allows to have good performance.
I'm not sure that's why Bwipo plays up. Like, I think he just goes forwards anyway.
Yeah, Bwipo, from what we've seen so far, Bwipo will play that way no matter what. But Broxah's matching well to it. Like, if you have someone that's playing that way no matter what, and you can be flexible enough to make sure like that player is getting enabled and that player is doing well, that skills well, that speaks well of that jungler.
But I would say he's not adaptable because he's played like towards one lane most of his career. Like Fnatic will pick kind of a lane, and that's what you play for. And I think that's what Bwipo has. I think that's what Broxah has to do because I don't think he's good at like, so their river control is so strong as a team because they'll play for like hard prio mids, right? Like Azir and stuff like this suits their playstyle very well. And that's why they'll have really good river vision. So when you have that in place, like, and when you're playing for enemy camps or instead of actually playing for lanes or whatever, then it's not predicting where the enemy jungler is, it's knowing where the enemy jungler is. So, and then even then,
prediction is doing it with information. Like, of course,
and I don't even agree that he's good at predicting where enemy jungler is, because I do see Fnatic laners get like random ganks from enemy jungle that they seem to be not prepared for, or that Broxah is not prepared for, and I think that is down to jungle a lot. So I think that's
like, not fair to say. Like, unless we get inside knowledge, we can't say, oh, they got ganked here because the jungler didn't warn them,
so
or they got ganked.
So if there's an optimal player for the jungle to beat, so like go bottom and secure the Sheen back for Reckless, and then he doesn't do that, that's not bad jungling, or what?
Sure, I mean in that example I'll give, but when we talk generally about
that's like the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, though. These kind of specific examples. So I think, and then like the Reckless will just get ganked or die or something like this, and the play doesn't happen. Whereas if it's a top side win condition, yeah, I agree he's gonna do that, but that's just because that's the way they play. That's their system, and I think Broxah has to work within a system, or Broxah doesn't work, and that's why I think his jungling is not that great.
You have to remember, Loco's a TSM fan, so just being able to service one lane appropriately every game is like a fucking miracle to this guy. Like, he's like, just keep hold of him, put a ring on that finger, you'll never know when you'll get another one of those, motherfucker. Loco, what you've done here, Loco, unfortunately at the moment, is actually unfair, because you've done the Reddit move. All you did is point out what you disagreed with, she said. So now we're going to turn it on you.
Sure,
you're the Redditor now, motherfucker. So you give me your rating. So Bwipo, we'll do your version. It's between, there's 10 top laners, technically there's more, but let's say there's 10 starting top laners.
Let's go Wonder Cabo. Those are like the easy ones off the board. Alfari, Wonder Cabo, Alfari. Let me try to think if I'm missing anyone. Wonder Cabo, Alfari. Wonder Cabo, Alfari.
There's no other obvious ones. That's probably the best ones.
Okay.
Odo Amne, that's about it, but I think you're probably
I'll probably do 4 then. Yeah.
Okay, so he's 4th, right? Now, what about Broxah? He's 1 or 2, you said?
Right, let's go to the other one, then we can come back to it in this order.
Okay. What about Nemesis then?
Nuked up caps. I guess you can like argue who is it? Holy fuck, humanoid now?
Humanoid.
But let's go Nemesis. Nemesis I'll give a variance on, because he's someone with very little sample size. High 3, low 4, but still low variance.
Okay, and then Reckless?
Let's go Perks, Upset, Patrick, Reckless, high 3, low 4. My high on, we rate him high, he's a 3. If we rate him low, he's a 4.
Right, and then Hylissang?
2.
Holy fuck. Right, okay, and then what's Broxah at the end?
Broxah? I think right now, either I would go Broxah 1, Zankus 2, or if I rate him low, Zankus 1, Broxah 2.
Right, so wait there. Well, then, by your own logic, they're overperforming the level of their players, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I agreed on. I said, yes, their system is good, but it's not good enough to take a 5 weighted all the way to a 1.
And yet, basically, as far as I can tell, the 2 players you think are the best is Broxah and Hylissang, right?
Yeah.
But before they established their system, they couldn't win any games. So I don't know. Like it's really weird.
I mean, they couldn't. Of course, they couldn't win. Of course, they couldn't win games because if you have Faker and you don't have Faker, your life's gonna feel fucking different. And they had European equivalent of Faker, and they had to rebuild the system because their system was built around having the best fucking player in Europe, and they figured out a new system that you can play without having the best player in Europe. So yes, of course they had a dip. I think that's normal.
No. Wait a second, because you just made it unreasonable there. You made it that I just went from having a team that was based around Faker, but in your mind, their team's like a bunch of the best players anyway. So what's the problem? Just don't play around mid. There you go, no problem.
What do you mean?
Sorry, do you have to play through mid? I wasn't aware of that.
Well, I think.
Well, you're telling me they have a fucking sick bot lane. No problem. Play through bot.
They had the Faker of EU, and then the Faker of EU went to the international stage and started fucking inting, and they managed to play through that. So, I don't know. Like this logic doesn't make the most sense.
What do you mean?
This Caps was legit dying like a couple times a lane to players like Scout and Rookie.
Sure, he died. I mean, he died, but he still had his performances. It's not like he died.
Like he didn't have like good game impacts in those games where he didn't perform well though.
Well, overall, a world. Okay, let's say Caps' like normal level is like say a 7, right? At Worlds, what do you think? Or let's give it a round number. Let's say Caps' normal level, like outside of World performance, is like a 10, not including this year. Leading up to the year, it was a 10, right? That's how they had success all the way in Europe. At Worlds, what do you think his level was? If normally his contribution to the game is a 10.
There were, like, against top teams, it was approaching non-existent. Against some of the weaker teams, it was good. Like, obviously, there were weaker teams in his group stage, so you got to see him style on those weaker teams. But I think versus, like, EDG, he didn't really have a super good game impact. Like, that game was more 1 through AD, I think. And then the games against IG...
Some were atrocious.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's really hard to give him a fixed number, but I think that he definitely had. He was like the coin flip Caps, right? And the bad Caps that came out probably because there was less like pressure. He had more pressure than he was used to from some of these mid laners, but not all of them, but some of them, either that or who just like freaked out and lost confidence or something like that. But I would say that if you go back and watch those games, it feels way more like Caps didn't have a very good impact, and Fnatic still managed to play around that. So I don't know. For me, like one changing, and then obviously everyone was fucking overrating Bwipo, really, like obviously, really highly.
Well, the joke I made earlier was that I've had to go from being what everyone called me a Bwipo hater to now I'm like a fucking Barrett fan because I'm the only one who's not saying he's like the worst fucking top laner. Like, he's actually a good player, just you have to play around him, obviously. That goes without saying if you've seen him play the game.
So I think it's really weird to say that, like, I don't think it's that strange to say that Fnatic's players are not all above average for Europe, because I don't think they are all above average for Europe. I think that that's a perfectly reasonable statement to make, and it's weird to me that when everyone who rates teams, like if there's a first place team, every player on that team has to be top 1 or 2 in their category.
I definitely didn't rate them that way.
No. She's talking about the trend. I mean, obviously last year, Loco, everyone would have picked all of the Fnatic players in the all-pro team.
The narrative around Fnatic is so weird for me because at the start of last split, they were all just dog shit exposed players because they couldn't win games. And then now, like, they're all the best players in the world again. And they're all fucking walking on water and saying, like,
I'm sure there's people saying that, and I think Fnatic fans are saying that, but I don't think they all have the best players, and that wasn't my argument. My argument is I don't think their system is good enough to take them from like a weighted score of a 5 all the way to a 1.
I don't think that their system is like insane. I think their system is well practiced, and that's why. Like, their system is more well practiced than any other system in Europe, and that's why they're number 1 right now. I think G2 will beat them in the end.
Why do you have such a high Loco? Let's give your side then.
I think that Fnatic deserve to be top 3, and but I don't think it's because Broxah is insane or anything like that.
Right, you gave the example earlier of, he's good at predicting where the other jungler is and matching him on the counter gank or whatever. Like, what other factors are there? Like, because you rated him very highly, you had him as 1 or 2, you had him ahead of everyone.
I think, what is it? if you go back to this argument at the end of the season, my opinion can change. But from the sample size shown from startup summer split to week 4, I think he has been by far the most impactful and the best jungler because of all the.
Logically, based on that, he's your MVP.
If season ended today, yes, he's my MVP. If season ended today,
logically.
No, if it ended today, he's my MVP.
It's
You know what's
weird
hilarious
because
about that, by the way, is she already said it earlier. I don't think you were listening when she was listing the names off. You do realize Kelsey and Veteran wouldn't even have like Broxah top 4.
Yeah, I'm sure they're
Like they
entitled to their own opinion.
it's just weird to me to talk to people who rate Broxah as like a top 2 jungle in LEC because I think to myself it's like we can't even be watching the same game, so I don't even know how to approach the argument. So
Sometimes when a chess grandmaster talks, the other side, it's really hard to understand.
Loco, here's the way it goes, right? You made the mistake of just tunneling on the Broxah part. If you wanted to make this interesting, what you would have asked is this. You know, when she was thinking before how to rank Broxah, did you hear some of the names she listed, mate? One of them was K-Drill from XL.
Yeah, K-Drill and Cold.
Right? So there you go. Why not ask that? Why do you think K-Drill is a better jungler than Broxah? I mean, he's in the worst team, right?
I guess here's the question then. Under Fnatic system, if they picked up K-Drill, do you think they would have the same placement or even better because K-Drill is better than Broxah, in your opinion?
I think that they could be a more flexible team, yeah. So
they could on average, they could do same as 7 and 1 or even higher.
Theoretically, I do think that changing jungle is one of the easiest way to improve this team. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically,
I agree with Kelsey wholly. I don't think we're watching the same games because if Kelsey's statement is with K-Drill, they could have the same result or even higher. I definitely don't think we're watching the same games.
Okay, give me a reason why then. No, wait a second. He has to give a reason, right? Give a reason why.
Because I saw K-Drill play earlier today and I was watching and he was fucking up some of the most basic stuff. So,
like what? Just give an example. You don't have to give a specific example. Just a general example. What things does he do badly, do you think?
There was a gank on boss side where Braum was reaching around and then he went in a way where he couldn't get the Braum at all. If he stayed on the same side, he would have killed Braum 100%. Okay. So like just basic, like if you do this, then you would have killed him. But he made the mistake of going around where you let that kill go. So like even watching mistakes like that, I'm like, he's Jarvan and the enemy support is a Braum. That's the context. So it's one of the games from last week.
Was it the SK game?
If what is it? I don't know the game itself, but I know the context.
I remember the exact moment you're talking about, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, K-Drill, why?" But like that particular moment doesn't make him a bad jungler because I could legit show you moments where Broxah isn't even going to the right lane.
I mean, sure, but that's not what is it. I'm not saying that makes them. Sure,
right? If it's like he made a mechanical mistake in a game, then okay, yeah, K-Drill's dog shit. If that's the entire thing that you're rating a jungler on, then yeah.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Doran said, "Give me an example of why you think he's bad," and I gave him an example of why I think he's bad. My argument was
but the only thing that's confusing there, Loco, I think what's triggering her there is you did make it sound like, well, just today I saw this. So like, aside from that, does he have other flaws as a jungler you think he's bad at?
I don't watch him in depth to say, but if you ask me to give me specific examples, sure, I can give examples like this.
Because here's the thing, like, first of all, Kelsey actually in H2K has worked with K-Drill, by the way. He was the jungler in that team. So I'll just add that context to people who don't know. But I'll just tell you, based on people I know who've been around him, the area people praise K-Drill highly on is actually things like communication, understanding what the game state is at the moment, etc. So logically, just because he's in a dogshit team now, and even then, XL actually has improved the last few weeks if you look, like the logic is, what would he bring to Fnatic? It's not that he'd be the same player he is in XL. The idea is, and I don't disagree on that, that's why I picked the example actually, is if you look, Fnatic does have some good players. So I feel like if they had a smarter jungler who had his own initiative and knew what the fuck he was doing, would come with people. I agree, kind of. I don't know whether I would personally pick K-Drill as that person, but the what he represents, I agree, would be better for Fnatic, I think, than what Broxah brings.
Wait, so Doran, you're also on the same boat. If Fnatic played with K-Drill, they could achieve this score?
I said I don't know if specifically K-Drill. Put it this way, mate. I don't personally have Broxah as high as you. So, for example, I don't even need to do any of that. I think if tomorrow Selfmade wakes up with a Fnatic jersey on, Fnatic's a better team already.
Wait, actually, no. Actually, that wouldn't change my rating. I would have Selfmade.
I would say that'd be game over, mate. I think he'd be a fucking insane.
I mean, I think like Broxah's pre-planning in his pathing and understanding of his team's win conditions is not flexible. It's just not. And I think that his leadership qualities are kind of lacking based on how he
Non-existent
plays.
as far as we can tell.
And so that's like why I have an issue, because I think to be a good jungler, you basically have to take control of the game. And that's why I don't think Broxah is like that great of a jungler.
Again, you have to realize this is the same Locodoco who thinks picking between fucking Acadian and Grig is a great like set of choices. Like, well, which one's the right one? It's like there's no right choice, mate. One's a fucking noose, the other's a gun. Which one do you want?
And like you gave an example of something mechanical, and I think that Kadril fucked up on. But in terms of his pathing or like how he's playing around the map, I think Kadril's better at that. Yeah. For sure.
Here's also a problem I'll bring up, Loco. This is why that's like, I gave that because she had mentioned the name already, so I thought it was fair to make an example. But I will also say the reason I wouldn't personally pick Kadril is I do think, unfortunately, he has a classic character flaw, which is a very common archetype in esports, which is that he's a guy who knows what to do and he can tell you what he wants to do, but he doesn't always execute in the game himself. So personally, I wouldn't side with Kadril. You're right on that one. But I can at least see the premise that Kelsey's going for with that one. Like what she thinks he would bring to the team, what he could do for them, and what Broxah doesn't do.
I'm honestly like really looking forward to like what other people's opinion is going to be when the show goes out, because for me it's like, holy shit, that's fucking crazy to say Fnatic could do similarly or better with Kadril than Broxah.
Yeah, I mean most people will agree with you because most people are Fnatic fans. Like this is like fair.
I don't think I'm not really a Fnatic fan. I'm not talking about like
if we're
Reddit.
Taking poll of public opinion. Then,
no, I don't think public. I think public opinion could agree 100% with you, and I would still feel the same way. I'm very curious to see what other players or other coaches and people that play in LEC, like I'm more curious on their opinion than like public opinion.
Problem with that, Loco, is think about how many statements I could make that would, if I go back in time now, right, and I meet you before season 9 starts, and I go, you know what, Loco, Crown will be the best mid laner in LCS in the summer split. You tell me that you get the fuck out, like you'd laugh in my face. If I go and I tell you, for example, like, oh, you know Trick, who's like in the worst team in Turkey, actually he comes back to LEC and his team rises up the rank. Like, again, you wouldn't believe any of this stuff. It sounds ridiculous. And forget Asian League, mate, where you can take players who've never played or were garbage and then now the best player in the world. Like, there's a lot of crazy. League is a game full of crazy statements, man.
I'm sure, but most crazy statements remain crazy statements, but there are a few that remain true. Like the Crown example you mentioned, like definitely I thought that was a crazy statement that came true. But for 100 crazy statements I hear, 90% of them just stay crazy statements.
All right, let me ask you this then, Loco.
Okay.
Let's say tomorrow we wake up, right, and my dream happens. For some reason, Broxah and Selfmade are traded. Broxah now plays for SK Gaming. How does he do? MVP of the league in your mind. How does he do on SK Gaming?
On SK Gaming. Probably not that well, because when I watch SK, it's when it's not Selfmade making plays, who is for this team. Like, I feel like...
No problem, mate. He's got Sacre, top laner, he's carry, he's got fucking period.
We didn't get
him from Korea.
Yeah, I did like him in spring, but like in summer, his performance has been disappointing. And like Sacre,
yeah, but no problem. He's getting the best jungler. He's getting the best jungler in the league, mate. If you're the mid, you're gonna love getting the best jungler. So come on, in comes Broxah. He makes the whole team better, right? Yeah, he does great in the team. So they're a better team, right? Do you think they're a better team?
I think SK is. I've
just done the same thing to you, Hori.
Okay, sure.
I've just made you say that the MVP of the league would be fucking worse than someone who isn't the MVP of the league, who plays the same position for a worse team.
Sure.
Do you see what I mean? Like, it sounds crazy.
No, it doesn't sound crazy. Yeah. I'll give the context on it.
Okay.
So for SK, they're a team where they're giving a lot of resource to their jungler and they have a lot of control on their jungler. So I think Selfmade is so well suited for this. So,
by the way, I just want to say, like, I don't know if you're being paid by SK Gaming, but I don't think they're giving all the resources to the jungler. I think if that's their only choice, and he fucking takes those resources. I think he just comes in like a man and goes, I am a self-made man. I'm the jungler. You fuck off.
Sure.
He does what he wants.
Okay.
I think, yeah, so...
let me address this point and then you can go ahead for this one.
Let me make this point. Come on, quickly.
For a team like this, I think a greedy and I think a carry-oriented jungler is way better suited. I would love to see like players like Dardoch on this team. I would love to see players, maybe not Rush nowadays, but like the Dardoch, Rush, Peanut, Selfmade, I think cut from that cloth belongs way more on SK. And I think yeah, that style of jungler is just going to be way more suited to play on SK. And I just don't think just because Selfmade would do better on SK than Broxah would do better on SK, I don't think that relatively makes Broxah a worse player than Selfmade. I just think SK as a team suits Selfmade so well right now. And over the course of like this team developing, they realize, holy shit, we have a god tier jungler. Like that's actually really good. We're going to play around them. We're going to enable them. And they develop skills that work well with a carry like jungler. And when you take that carry like jungler away and you put a different kind of jungler in, of course, I think the results are going to be worse. But I don't think that makes Broxah worse than Selfmade at all.
I think that Broxah doesn't adapt very well to situations. Like there were a lot of examples where when they played with Soaz, he would basically just be still playing to top lane because they've been playing to top lane like this even when Soaz had to play tanks. And then I just didn't really understand the situation. Like if Fnatic vary their draft, it feels like Broxah will still play the same way, even if the champions and the win conditions are changed. And there are examples of this, and that's why I think if you put Broxah on another team, he just wouldn't look good. It would take him a really long time to look good. And so that's why I don't think you can rate him that highly as a jungler, whereas I think you could slot a bunch of different junglers in LEC into other teams, and they could perform like as good or better. So a lot of junglers will have like the ability to adapt to new team environment, the ability to change how they're playing the game because they're thinking about the game in terms of like win conditions and how much power they have as an individual unit or an individual kind of force in dictating early game decisions. And it feels like Broxah doesn't do a lot of that individually. So to me, that's why I think it's like hard to rate Broxah as a really good jungler.
Okay.
Here's the problem, Loco. I'll extend it further. I think the majority of teams with a good jungler would be worse if their jungler swaps with Broxah tomorrow. Meanwhile, Fnatic would be better. So the only team I can think of who's vaguely a top team I think would be as good is Splice. Guess what, Broxah? That's your dream teammate. Go play for that team. Like, you'll be fine in that team. If you put fucking most of the other players, like you're telling me if I take Jankos and put him on Fnatic, Fnatic's probably the best team in the league, mate. Like, look at what fucking Jankos would do to this team.
No, I think G2 would still win. If Jankos and Broxah still swapped, I would go G2 over Fnatic any day.
Put Broxah on G2, I'd love to see that fucking
team. I would, in that swap, I think I would still, go way more towards G2 than Fnatic.
Well done.
We saw Caps and Broxah before. Like, we saw like how this dynamic works. Like, I'm 100% on the G2 side if the jungler swapped.
They wouldn't have that style of play whatsoever, mate, if they played together now. Not in G2
Caps
especially.
Has changed. Caps doesn't play the way he did on Fnatic anymore. We already kind of covered this. I also think a really underrated thing that propels how effective G2 is synergy between Mickey X and Jankos, and I think that's more important than Caps Jankos synergy. Honestly, I think it's like Caps Wonder is really important synergy, and then Mickey X and Jankos is really important synergy. And I don't know how Broxah would do with Mickey X either, because a lot of it is based off of when Mickey X resets and like how they can get vision for objectives off of this. And Broxah doesn't path with objectives in mind. He just doesn't. And so that's why I think it would be a struggle. Like he passed with like, okay, we're going to invade topside and we're going to gank this lane over and over, or we're going to counter jungle this camp over and over again. We're going to get bolt raptors. We're going to do this type of jungling style. And he doesn't necessarily think as much about like getting vision for river, for dragons.
I'm not sure if that's inside information or like observing, but I think that's a lot of speculations made on like how Fnatic plays and how Broxah like works within Fnatic.
Oh, well, what else should we do then? Just sit here and go, well, none of us can know. So I guess
I'm
speculating, man. That's all we can do.
I'm sure
Broxah has been this way a lot, like for a really long time on Fnatic. And I don't know if it's just, and Caps plays differently on a different team. Yeah. But I would say that overall, like, a lot of river control is based on bottom for Fnatic. A lot of river control is based on support jungle for G2. So maybe you're arguing Broxah could adapt to this situation, but we have no way of knowing that. And I think that you're changing a very fundamental aspect of how G2 succeed in the early and mid game by swapping out Broxah when Broxah doesn't do this naturally on Fnatic, even when it looks like, okay, this is a really good time for him to run with Hillsong and get vision for this dragon and start this dragon, and he doesn't do that. So I think it's really weird to say that he would naturally do that on G2 suddenly.
Of course you would naturally do it. Of course you would work with the player, you would work with the staff, and you would find the best fit. I don't think like people naturally fit in. Like definitely he's going to have to change if he plays for a different team, and vice versa for Jankos. I don't think...
No, but the point here is, even with different teammates, he has never shown the ability to adapt. Ever, Loco. We're talking for 3 years here, mate. Like, when's it going to happen? What's he waiting for to adapt with the current teammates? You're telling me he's going to go to G2 and adapt with all... He hasn't done it with his current teammates he's playing with now. The guy's a fucking jungler. He has problems ganking mid with a fucking support who loves going mid all the time on his
I don't think that's true at all. What
the fuck is this shit?
I don't think he has problem ganking mid. I think he has problems ganking bot. Like I think his mid synergy is pretty decent. His top synergy is really good.
I think garbage in spring, mate. That's why they had to put a band-aid over the whole team.
I think yes.
And only go bot.
Sure. I mean, no, I agree with you on spring, but I think the original argument came about in these 4 weeks. I think Broxah is the best jungler, but in these 4 weeks, I think he has excellent gank synergy with top, decent gank synergy with mid, and pretty bad gank synergy with bot.
Okay. Right,
So
well,
you
we've
rank
established
jungling
that.
on gank synergy.
Oh.
Is that you rank jungling on gank synergy, or
No,
like,
I mean I don't think I said that's the be it end all of it, but that's one
but
part
that's
I
like
think
the point you keep coming back to, though.
that's a point I'm making. That's a point that goes with it. Yes.
Anyway, I think this ends this episode of Kelsey versus Reddit, and thanks to everyone for tuning in, and Loco for reading off a lot of the top voted comments before they were even made. We thank you all for appearing on this episode, and if you want to support the podcast, someone has to, then listen Loco, patreon.com/listenloco. Thank you.
Kelsey, do you have any final shout outs or anything you want to say?
I mean, thank you to 100 Thieves for employing me, and you can watch us continue our Academy win streak this Wednesday.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show, Duncan. Do you have any final shout outs or anything you want to say?
No, just enjoyed letting you run this motherfucker into the ground over the last 45 minutes, but whatever. It's all good because now all the Fnatic fans can just hate on Kelsey. So that's how this episode ends, sadly, but that is the reality.
I mean, G2 fans can hate on me for saying Broxah is better than Jankos for the first 4 weeks. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you to our gold Patreon supporters, Butt Pounder 420, Tobias Bernasconi, and Icelandic C9 fan. So, Butt Pounder 420, I understand you wanted your name to be in lower caps. I'll try to do that for next episode. And thank you so much to all other Patreon supporters for making this happen. Without you guys, this episode wouldn't be possible. And I genuinely really enjoy doing Listen Loco. And yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much.